You are a hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you and watch over you. Rejoice in the Lord and be glad, you righteous. Sing all you who are upright in heart. Psalms 145. At his gates with thanksgiving, and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations. Shall we pray? Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to your queen and her government. Grant to our Governor General and her support staff. Grant to our Prime Minister, Dr. Hubert Minnis and his government, members of our Bahamian Parliament, and all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Holy Spirit. May they never lead our nation wrongly, through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideals, by laying aside all private interests and prejudices. Keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all mankind. So may your kingdom come and your name be hallowed. Amen. Honorable members, shall we now pray the prayer our Lord Jesus taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Have a productive day.
Good morning, honorable members. When the business of the House suspended on Thursday, the 28th of September, the honorable member for North Andros and the Berry Islands had reserved the floor. The chair recognizes the honorable member for North Andros and the Berry Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thomas Jefferson says, the care of human life and happiness, and not their destruction, is the first and only object of good government. Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of praising our illustrious Governor General, whom hails from the beautiful island of Andros, whom we all are fond of our remarkable display of grace and the highest standards of national decorum. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Prime Minister, honorable members of Parliament, I bring you greetings from the great constituency of North Andros and the Berry Islands. Mr. Speaker, before I go on, I would like to recognize a very beautiful young lady from North Mastic Point that did a very stellar job on Sunday night at the Bahamas Universe, Miss Universe, Miss Danielle Gator. Wishing her all the best in her endeavors as she go on into the future. Mr. Speaker, once again, I would like to thank my constituents for entrusting in me the opportunity to be here today, representing their needs and their interests. Mr. Speaker, in the wake of so many natural disasters, locally and internationally, we must continue to thank the Almighty God for His grace and mercy. And we must remember to always be our brother's keeper. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to thank God for our Prime Minister for understanding the need to adhere and extend humanitarian efforts to our neighboring ally and providing a safe haven for those who are in most need. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. North Andros and the Berry Island stands with you. Mr. Speaker, North Andros has been hailed as the Bahamas agricultural hub, primarily because of our large mass of land, rich soil, and fresh water. However, Mr. Speaker, agriculture has been declining as the proportion of the world economy since it peaked in the 1910s. Every day it becomes more prevalent for our nation to feed ourselves. Mr. Speaker, mainly due to the cost of importation, pollution, and the rise of genetically modified foods. Mr. Speaker, our health is at risk. Our people are plagued with morbid obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and last but not least, cancer. All which are linked to the foods that we consume on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, our nation is depending on us to feed the country. But to do this, we must be able to empower our local farmers and inspire our children to be interested in agronomics. Mr. Speaker, this administration goal is to attract more citizens to study agriculture and marine resources, agro-industrial and subsistence fields. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas Agriculture and Marine Science Institute, better known as BAMSI, was established to reduce the Bahamian food import bill. This undertaking is to achieve through increases in local production and accessibility to the local market via existing and new distribution systems. Mr. Speaker, increased production is also achieved by stimulating the agricultural sector by improving technology and education. Technology improvement is driven at BAMSI's research and tutorials farm in North Andros, with the testing of crops and improving livestock. Mr. Speaker, the government has a keen interest in BAMSI. We are identifying both pros and cons of the institution in an effort to make it better to appease the needs of local farmers and our nation's demands. Mr. Speaker, we have reached a pivotal point in North Andros and the Berry Islands, where we must move forward in restructuring our social economic development system to ensure future growth, progression, and success of our local economy. We can do this, Mr. Speaker, by restructuring and exploring new innovative ideas It will allow our economy to rely less on government. It will create a stronger business community, permanent employment, which will eventually improve the standards of living in North Andros. However, Mr. Speaker, our first step is to educate our people, to inspire them to become entrepreneurs by taking advantage of our tourism, farming, and fishing industries. Mr. Speaker, on July 11th of this year, I was happy to introduce the first annual self-employment empowerment program. The North Andros constituency hosted a 2-week community Bahama Host training seminar for the first 35 unemployed persons to register at absolutely no cost. Mr. Speaker, I was elated to introduce such an important empowerment program to the residents of North Andros and the Berry Islands that will encourage each participant to assist and take part in uplifting our community, to train and develop each other. Mr. Speaker, it is my goal to introduce several self-help and entrepreneurial classes where we will teach our people new skills and knowledge that they can use to help themselves. Mr. Speaker, as the Member of Parliament for North Andros and the Berry Islands, I hope to inspire and foster more community-based initiatives that will foster strong ties, bringing back the age-old practice of community working together to achieve a common goal. Mr. Speaker, I want to empower my people for the long haul, where our livelihood and overall survival no longer depends mainly on social service assistance or government handouts. Mr. Speaker, I envision a community that is bonded together through shared love of self and community, where we will truly be our brother's keeper. Mr. Speaker, the devastating impact of Hurricane Matthew, North Andros Regatta site was completely demolished. When I first took office in May of this year, I had 2 main goals to undertake immediately, one of which was to rebuild the North Andros Regatta site, and secondly, to complete the construction of the long-awaited community center in the Berry Islands. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, I am elated to boast about the tenacious spirit of North Androsians. Mr. Speaker, we pulled together in true community togetherness and rebuild the regatta site. We have made great strides in North Andros. Mr. Speaker, unity and pride was displayed in all efforts and in an impeccable manner. North Andros and the Berry Islands regatta was about to be canceled. Mr. Speaker, I will gladly go on record and say that that regatta was one of the best regatta to this day. Mr. Speaker, and after numerous discussions with the hard-working men and women of the Berry Islands, they are also prepared to lend their service and skills at no cost to complete the decade-old promise of completing the community center. Mr. Speaker, this is what I call unity. This is what I call togetherness. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to speak on the progress of the ongoing road works, and that the settlement of North Mastic Point will finally be receiving long-awaited water system upgrades. Pipes are already on the ground for the better water improvement. Mr. Speaker, on a more sober note, on October 7th of last year, Hurricane Matthew made a devastating impact on the northern Bahamas, especially in the community of Low Sound, North Andros. Mr. Speaker, after almost a year, there has been very little to no relief for my constituents. The constituency of North Andros relies heavily on social service assistance because the local economy is unstable and many persons are unemployed. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew, 14 family homes were completely destroyed. Social service provides housing for these families for almost a year, and now they are forced to evacuate their current residence with nowhere to go. Mr. Speaker, the former government and NEMA did not fulfill their obligations to the residents. Mr. Speaker, but as the new government of the Bahamas, we inherit a country that is filled with many woes. But we must step up to the plate and alleviate as much burden from our people as possible. Mr. Speaker, having been threatened by Hurricane Irma, the residents of North Andros and the Berry Islands were terrified. Mr. Speaker, they were terrified because their homes has partially or completely been torn to shreds from the merciless, unsought attack of Hurricane Matthew. Mr. Speaker, to this day, nearly a year later, repairs and assistance from NEMA seems to be at halt. $150 million borrowed to aid in hurricane relief, and North Andros and the Berry Islands had minor roof repairs, 3 trailer homes, and not one home rebuilt since the devastation of Hurricane Matthew. Mr. Speaker, one of those family home houses was destroyed, had 6 disabled kids with nowhere to live. I call on our government, the government of this great country, to help us. North Andros has a very high rate of unemployment, and after being annihilated by Hurricane Matthew, with very little to no relief over the past year, my people are still in need. Several families are still displaced. Mr. Speaker, my people still find themselves relying heavily on social service to assist them with housing them. Several families find themselves on the streets. This has never happened before, Mr. Speaker. But we know it will take time to restore. But, Mr. Speaker, I ask that relief be given to these families. Mr. Speaker, with the help of our Prime Minister, Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, I am sure North Andros and the Berry Islands will get the help they desperately need from NEMA. Mr. Speaker, I wish to elaborate and stress, Mr. Speaker, I must stress the vital needs for my constituents. Mr. Speaker, as I toured the government complexes throughout my constituency, what I saw was dreadful. I was appalled at the lurid condition. Mr. Speaker, I visited each facility, and I saw the hazardous conditions the employees are forced to work under. And I am here today to advocate for immediate relocation and to begin construction on a new airport terminal that will house a new Customs and Immigration Department. Mr. Speaker, the current government complex is condemned. The Customs and Immigration building are filled with mold and infestation. As the Member of Parliament for North Andros and the Berry Islands, I must express the need for immediate attention to remedy our current state. Mr. Speaker, this infrastructure improvement will automatically increase the island's tourism product and create several jobs and new business opportunities for the people of Berry Islands. Mr. Speaker, it is my plan to work hand in hand with local government and residents of my constituency to create a modern, comprehensive plan that is achievable in the best interest of the people of North Andros and the Berry Islands. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, our seaport of entry in the Berry Islands needs a drastic overhaul by adding and updating the government dock, make it more accessible and multifunctional. Multifunctional for small boats and local ferries by adding docking slips will make the daily transit for residents and commercial use much easier. Mr. Speaker, it is my intent to have the roads in Berry Islands and in North Andros, especially my ancestral settlement of Red Bays, paved. For years, motorists in my constituency has endured driving through huge potholes as they make their daily commute. Over the years, only minimal to no relief was brought to the residents of North Andros and the Berry Islands. Mr. Speaker, I've always been an advocate for technical and vocational education because I believe, Mr. Speaker, not all children learn the same. Mr. Speaker, the government has a robust plan for education in this country. North Andros and the Berry Islands can and will be a part of that plan. The opening of the technical and vocational building at the now Huntley Christie High School is long overdue. Mr. Speaker, this building, I am certain, has been under construction for at least the last 15 years. It is imperative that this building is completed. The technical and vocational building will open the doors for young people, and in keeping with the government's plan to introduce apprenticeship, to introduce the apprenticeship program. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, it is my mandate to introduce dual enrollment program in conjunction with the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute. It is proposed that this program is introduced at the 10th grade level, where students can be afforded the opportunity to enroll in programs or credits of their interest. And on a larger scale, all residents of the community will have the opportunity to enroll in the subscribed programs, such as construction, the mechanical, and fashion trades. Mr. Speaker, I believe in teaching a man to fish. With the introduction of these programs, we will allow my people to be self-sufficient. The completion of this building is one of my mandate, Mr. Speaker, that was outlined in my manifesto. And I promise the people of North Andros and the Berry Islands, I will see it through. Mr. Speaker, I know that nothing happens overnight. To reach our ultimate goal, it will take all of us participating in discussions, lending questions, and answers so that we can find solutions that is custom fit to our unique needs on each island throughout this archipelago. Mr. Speaker, I am dedicated to serve the great people of North Andros and the Berry Islands. I've learned so much from my people. They have not only showed resiliency, they are showing me that dreams, Mr. Speaker, dreams to access the basic necessities, such as fresh water, access to electricity. Electricity, Mr. Speaker, which has been a hindrance to the community of North Andros for years, decades. We need to have a power plant upgrade in North Andros and the Berry Islands. The generators are not putting out what they should be. We are experiencing a lot of blackouts, sharing current. 6 hours in Low Sound, 6 hours in Mastic Point. We're calling on the government to come to the needs of our people. Mr. Speaker, also our medical assistance and proper education will be readily accessible and will become reality. And in closing, Mr. Speaker, our hearts goes out to our people in Ragged Island and Markel, and also to our brethren country, Dominica. I know that it will take a while to rebuild. But I know, Mr. Speaker, that we will rebuild stronger than ever before. I know that we will be all right, because I believe a nation that prays together stays together, sir. Mr. Speaker, I know that we will build and restore hope back into the hearts of our people in this great Bahama land. May God bless you, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Mangrove Key and South Andros.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If it wasn't raining, I would have used it, you know. So I didn't have to call the fire engine, you know how that is. Mr. Speaker, I would like to commence my presentation by joining my parliamentary colleagues in thanking Her Excellency Dame Marguerite for her speech from the throne. Although the public square was fiery and humid on that beautiful morning, Dame Marguerite, in her regal, effervescent, and poised manner, presented her government speech for this great country and the way forward. I can't help but note the fact that Dame Marguerite read from a regular printed booklet, but she comported herself well and spoke with clarity and sound vocal intonations coupled with professional enunciation. Thanks, Your Excellency, and may God continue to bless you with good health and a long life. Mr. Speaker, it was just recently I saw Her Excellency's hard and caring spirit in more recent times when we visited the districts of North and Central Andros together, accompanied by NEMA's Captain Stephen Russell and the former Member of Parliament for North Andros and the Berry Islands, Dr. Perry Gomez, MD, and other NEMA officials. It was at that time that she listened, hugged, sung, smiled, and even prayed with our people who would have suffered much social dislocation and also financial loss following Hurricane Matthew. Dear Marguerite, we love you for caring. Mr. Speaker, in my brief presentation this morning on the established resolution, I would highlight generally the areas that fall under my purview as Shadow Minister for the Environment, Housing, Sports, and Culture, coupled with some general concerns for the constituency of Mangrove Key, South, and Central Andros. The Bahamas has made great strides in preserving its environment. The Christie administration, through the establishment of the Ministry of Environment and Housing, and the drafting of legislation for the ministry and its regulatory regime, and the new Department of Environmental Planning and Protection, were all designed to improve the quality of life for Bahamians. Some other developments which accompanied the establishment of this great ministry were the expansion of the marine protected areas to preserve our seas and aquatic life from 2 million to 13 million acres, the creation of youth environment core program, with the intention of training our young adults for careers in blue and green economies. The establishment of the Bahamas Public Parks and Beaches Authority. Also, we saw the establishment of the joint venture with a private firm to begin the landfill remediation process, which today is still in train and still a work in progress. The amended Derelict Vehicles Disposable Act to empower the director of DEHS, which is the Department of Environmental Health Services, to be able to remove such vehicles immediately if deemed hazardous to public health or safety. But Mr. Speaker, a matter that comes closest to my heart is the general upkeep of our city of Nassau. Our city is much too dirty, Mr. Speaker. One were to drive along the roads coming in from the international airport and see the amounts of papers and trash along the streets. Your heart could not help but be saddened. I still believe in the old credo that was espoused by my grandmother and others, that cleanliness is always next to godliness. We've got to find a way to establish an environmental court with real teeth, with strong enforcement elements, so that our people would know that we're serious about keeping our society and our country clean. In 2017, the small-scale renewable generation program was started, which allows customers with standalone wind and solar systems to apply for grid connection. The PLP administration also eliminated tariffs on inverters for solar panels and LED appliances. It was also under the former administration we saw the first public building, the BAIC headquarters operated by solar power, and also we saw the release of the Bahamas National Energy Policy 2013-2033 with a goal of 30% renewable deployment by the year 2030. In housing, Mr. Speaker, this is an arena that the PLP can always stand proud in through its government housing program over the years. With some haste, I would note the fact that there was the completion of the Sunset Close, Strawn's Hill subdivisions, and the expansion of the Adastray subdivision also. There was also the construction of the John Claridge subdivision, also under the former Adastra Gardens. I always get it wrong. Adastra, I'm sorry. Adastra. Thank you very much, Minister of Education. Established relations with the private banks as approved lenders for potential homeowners was also a very good gesture by the former administration. We signed contracts for the construction of 38 homes in Freeport, and there was also continuance of that program until this day. We assisted many families in acquiring their first home. The PLP before the meeting office was in the process of developing a rent-to-own program in home ownership, which would have allowed Bahamians who would not ordinarily qualify, Mr. Speaker, to buy and own a home of their own. Also, Mr. Speaker, the development of the new housing models and energy-efficient housing outfitted with photovoltaic systems was the next progressive step forecasted by the PLP in office in its 21st century home ownership program. Quickly, Mr. Speaker, as we look at tourism, I would look at tourism today in a different angle, especially sports tourism. And I would like to say to the member for Marco City that as the new minister, I note the fact that it's very easy sometimes to be in these ministries, but there are certain ministries that give certain leverage. And now let's say I know where I sat very quietly in the corner, maybe eavesdropping. Sometimes the Ministry of Tourism is a good ally to have in being in sports. I'll leave it at that. That's all I'll say. Sports tourism is emerging as a key component in tourism supply and development. Major tourism destinations are developing tourism product concepts revolving around pleasure sports. Their concepts enable destinations to stand against other competitors and increase their competitive edge in the international arena, attracting consumers who are keen on getting in touch with nature and interacting with the community while enjoying a healthy and interactive vacation. I would therefore like to thank my colleague, former Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, for his relentless efforts and initiatives in the sports arena, the World Relays, Youth World Games, College Bowl Games, the NCAA Basketball Classic at Atlantis, improvements and upgrades to our sporting facilities, also his continued support for our athletes locally and internationally. Mr. Speaker, as one who loves sports, who played sports at a certain level, I would like one day to see, as the Yankees last night captured the wild card game in baseball, maybe one day we can have a special facility for elite athletes in Andros. Went home just the other day and look at all that land as we landed with our leader. And I said, Lord, this is plenty good land. Maybe having our very own Miss Shawnee Miller Ubo being his patron. And this can follow suit to what I saw in Jamaica just recently, where they had the facility at the University of the West Indies named in honor of Mr. Usain Bolt, or what has happened in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, where they've done so in honor of Mr. Otto Bolden, now an NBC News sports analyst. Sports tourism, Mr. Speaker, will lead to further private-public sector partnerships being formed, which would lead, in my view, to persuading visitors to visit our country, stimulating visitation at particular times of the year, encouraging visitors to stay longer, facilitating repeat visitations, generating media coverage and promotional opportunities for the Bahamas as a destination, also broadening the perceptions of our island destinations beyond New Providence and Grand Bahama, to be namely. Quickly, Mr. Speaker, cultural heritage tourism is now caught on worldwide, as it provides an opportunity for visitors and locals alike to experience their culture in depth, while visiting attractions with historical and cultural relevance, and also by taking part in these cultural activities themselves. Our culture, Mr. Speaker, speaks to our anthropology, our past, our present, and also includes the historical value and natural resources of our country and our people. Mr. Speaker, we must preserve our culture. We know and have heard much over the years about cultural penetration, and we must maintain who we are as a people. The way we do, say, sing, or express ourselves, or our everyday Bahamian dialect. These are called idiomatic expressions. We must continue to be proud to be Bahamians. Those who come and join us in our fair land must assimilate, while they observe the relevant treasures and expressions of their native lands. There's no problem with that. But if you're in the Bahamas, do what we do here in the Bahamas and enjoy it and be a part of it. You could observe your things, but we want you to be a part of what we're doing here in no small way either. Historical attractions, monuments, landmarks, museums, art galleries, theaters, festivals, concerts, performances, which are culturally significant, neighborhoods, communities, could all use some injection of new life and vitality. We must be proud of Baintown, Fort Finn Castle, the water tower, the lighthouses, the libraries, tradition bearers, tea makers, plat sowers, chanters, the list goes on, chant sayers, the list goes on. We must continue to invest in our culture, not only John Canoe, but our youth rake and scrape, our festivals and homecomings, and traditions such as wakes and New Year's Eve rolling out events. These must be preserved, because I know now that they are under attack. There are many parties now that are going on New Year's Eve, when we all would have gone to church, Carmichael, Southern Shores, over the years on New Year's Eve night. We're changing some things. Wakes have become normal, but drinking rum and actually going to wake and singing old-time hymns. This is real. I go to a wake and 10 o'clock they're selling everyone drink almost and drunk. That is not us. And we must preserve some things uniquely Bahamian. And that's what makes us stand out from the rest. When we do things that are uniquely Bahamian, and let's keep it down home a little while longer. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, amidst the vitriol and acrimonious comments about John Canoe Carnival established by the prior administration, I must say that there's been no other major developments in more recent years that has led to the springboarding of Bahamian musical talents being so recognized in our country. Additionally, many John Canoers and artisans are now telling their stories, how they would have benefited financially in the very what we know in the culturally dry season due to John Canoe Carnival. Mr. Speaker, I say to the present government, instead of simply destroying it or getting rid of it, I think it should be tweaked and looked at, because this is the world we live in today. Those are simply my words of admonition. Mr. Speaker, the effect of an event, policy change, market trends, investment outlooks, unemployment, supply shortages, taxes, or the removal thereof, all are impacted by words. The way something is said has major implications for its imports. Mr. Speaker, we cannot come in here and preach gloom and doom when an interconnected world observes, let alone Moody's, the IMF, and other financial institutions and luminaries, and expect it not to have an impact on how people see us and see our country and its trajectory for real development and growth. Mr. Speaker, on this rainy Wednesday morning, the Bahamian people are still awaiting relief as promised by their government. No VAT on water bills, no VAT on electricity, no VAT on medical supplies and services, no VAT on bread basket items, butter, cooking oil, rice, sugar, flour, tomato paste, grits, corned beef. These are all the things that this government, which now must be saying as my government, promised our people. Over the hill, they're watching me right now over the hill. In Bullock's Harbor, the Berry Islands, West End and Grand Bahama, North Angeles, you heard just now, South Angeles for sure, Paris, Malgona, they were promised assistance and help. They are waiting on this relief as promised. They were told on day one they will see relief on VAT on these bread basket items. Mr. Speaker, I simply say, we say a collective no to income tax on this side in this honorable place. I joined the member for Exuma and Ragged Island, who is already established as a financial spokesperson, that we on this side say no to any form of income tax. The government won nearly every seat in the city, and they claimed it's the people's time. Well, our people are waiting today, Mr. Speaker, for real relief. And no amount of spin and linguistic genuflecting could explain to the Bahamian people why, in my view, they are being fired, whereas many on the other side, the governing side, will simply say, your contract expired. People know better. Mr. Speaker, the member for Garden Hills, my good friend from Black Point, Exuma, we have a lot in common. But the reality is that the other day he threw one on us, and I had to do a little bit of work, and he said that the previous administration, he said he noted the fact that under the Progressive Liberal Party in more recent times, the PLP empowerment program that was supposed to have cost some $10 million went up to some $16 million and more. But I need this member just to cast his mind back a few years. It was between 2007 to 2012, when the administration that he would have been a part of had a 52-week program that was initially forecasted to cost some $28 million, which ballooned to a cool but painful $48 million by 2012. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian public can do the math. They can add. They know the variance and know the difference. The PLP government led by Perry Christie had to absorb all of these Bahamians engaged in the 52-week program and other F&M government's programs, which were not, in many instances, properly financially appropriated for. Mr. Speaker, governance is continuous and should be compassionate. The 1,700 young people and other Bahamians attached to the public service and other state-owned enterprises are expecting empathy and compassion from their government. And they should expect no less. After all, Mr. Speaker, a lot of them fooled the PLP and voted for the F&M. So you hired them for purpose. Mr. Speaker, let me say that again for emphasis. Many of these same persons who are now concerned and operating today in a sense and moving around in a state of trepidation and very reticent, fooled the PLP. What do you mean? Fooled the PLP. What do you mean by that? And at the end of the day, they're now being told that their contract has expired. Well, very few of these mothers, Mr. Speaker, in the Family Islands or here in New Providence have BJCs, BGCSEs, or the adequate or necessary literary skills. Many of them are trying to save themselves from physical, psychological, and also some societal ostracism, and now being told to go home because the PLP hired you wrongly. Mr. Speaker, something is wrong with that picture. Half of these young people are today very frustrated and very concerned. But like the old people used to say, it ain't going, it coming. They were warned by the former administration. Senior public servants, some of whom may have gotten a contract extension or two. In my view, fired on the spot, others were sent on unrequested or unsolicited leave or vacation with no established dates as to when they are required to return to their established posts. Mr. Speaker, this once again is wrong. They are Bahamians. We are better than that. We are a small society, so let's continue to be our brothers and sisters' keeper. Mr. Speaker, I noted and observed the passion of the member for Kalani and Prime Minister as he addressed this Parliament on devastation visited upon the Commonwealth of Dominica by Hurricanes Irma and Maria. I know and have met with Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt and his foreign ministry staff in my more recent past while serving as ambassador to CARICOM. Our heart goes out, Mr. Speaker, to the people of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and we support the compassion expressed by the government. But don't let us lose focus on the fact that many Bahamians in this beautiful land are also still suffering from the ravages of hurricanes in more recent years. In my view, Mr. Speaker, this is my personal view and subjective view. I think the member for Kalani gave the world, in my view, a bad impression of Bahamians to some degree by noting that he was disappointed in their reaction to his initiative towards the Commonwealth of Dominica. Mr. Speaker, the record is clear. The Bahamas has welcomed and housed more nationals from the region and other territories than any other country per capita in this part of the world. And at last count, there were some 66 different nationalities living in the Bahamas, among Bahamians. It speaks to our charity, our humanity, and the all-embracing spirit of the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, Rugged Island, Salina Point, Inagua, North and Central Andros, Grand Bahama, and Bimini all need help today as I stand here, Mr. Speaker. But I too, with a Christian heart, would refer to the biblical admonition and simply use a pericope from 1 John 3 and 17 as a brief extract. And I quote, "But whosoever hath this world's goods, and seeth his brother have need, and shut up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him?" Had the Prime Minister used that verse before he came in here, I might have felt a little, I might have understood what I said, but I'm just only that's only a side statement.
But you found so only that verse.
I understand what he's doing, so I support some of the things he would have said. But I think Bahamians just wanted a little more explanation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Antigua and Barbuda, with the latter saying tremendous damage, St. Thomas, St. Martin, Puerto Rico, Tortola, St. Croix, and most U.S. and British territories all suffered major damages, including the Turks and Caicos Islands, our sisters to the south. And most instances, catastrophic losses due to the hurricanes. Climate change is real. And as a person of faith, I think these are perilous times. There are wars and rumors of wars, earthquakes in diverse places. And only us as members of faith and those who have strong belief, while we cling to climate change, I feel that these are the last days. I would also like to thank Mr. Speaker in my wrap-up, Mrs. Wilma Colebrook, Francis Hepburn Simonet, and Mr. Glenn Liburn, and my administrators for the Great District of South Central and Mangrove Key. Chief Councilors David Nemore, Pastor Keith Robinson, Zebedee Roll, and South Angeles, along with their local government practitioners, civic and religious leaders, for preparing and securing and protecting our indigent and less fortunate during the recent passages of the hurricanes named earlier, Irma and Maria. From the constituency level, Mr. Speaker, there's still no medical doctor this morning in Central Andros, or Fresh Creek to be exact. And I want to thank the member for Elizabeth for responding to my WhatsApp and to my phone call. Thank you as we look for some relief, sir. And I would have done the same and forwarded to Administrator Lightbourne. Completion of the road works and government building upgrades, the administrators complex in Fresh Creek. And we look forward for the tendering of the road works from the airport in Andros down to Bearing Point. The roads are in bad shape. Minister of Works, your hometown boy. We depending on you to do that for us, okay? Completion of the dock in Bearing Point. You know, my minister's going, I can't hear talk now. Runway, repair of the runway at Andros Town. You and I both lying from North because we know how this thing goes. The ministers count, you know. Runway of the Andros Town. Also, Mr. Speaker, I must know this point. The member for Kalani, who's also in this place, I hope now that, you know, it's always good to say where you're from and where your navel string is buried. I said navel, I think it was a hometown. I'll say navel string is buried, and we have some connection to Central. I would love to one day hear the member for Kalani say that he's going to open an office of the Prime Minister in Andros one day pretty shortly. You have one in Abaco, you have one in Exuma, you have one in Grand Bahama. Well, open something in Andros. Let us open the office of the Prime Minister in Andros. Let our hometown people feel a part of this process. Since he's glad to talk about his heritage and his legacy, open something major in Andros, Prime Minister. That's what I'm talking about. So that is, I want Cecil Penn, who supports him, and Norwood Romney, who supports me, to hear me saying that openly. I know you're all watching. I'm asking him to do it today. So that these land issues could be dealt with. And also that young people who remain in these islands could kind of move on with their lives. They can't go to the banks and borrow to grade and do basic stuff because they have no land title. You know what happens, Mr. Speaker? Let's move on quickly. The opening and the sale of the Lighthouse Club in Fresh Creek, the load shedding and the power issues are one that is really causing much concern. In Mangrove Key, the port of entry status issue is still unsettled. The resurfacing and dredging of the Lisbon Creek dock. We are praying for the clinics to be completed pretty shortly. The Minister of Works that we complete the Mangrove Key High School playing field and sporting facility. And also I'm asking my member, the friend from Bamboo Town, to help us and work with the sponging industry program down in Mangrove Key, and so that we can have the construction of a facility. So the people have to put their sponge no longer on the grass or on the bay. Put in a good, so I am saying to you, you know, I'm talking to the Minister of Works so you can get the drawing quick. Don't let it be long, you know, so we can go down and have a regal celebration at Clarence A.B.N. International Airport and have a grand day when we can all we can sing together lustily so that Andros could feel some relief. You got it right. For South Andros, our hometown, the completion of the gym in the Bluff, expansion of an improvement to the airport terminal in Congo Town. I join with the member for North Andros and the Berry Islands. These terminals are in bad shape. They've been there for years. And they cannot suffice what needs to be done when visitors are returning home, bone fishing and others, or major holidays, people have to stand in the yard. These buildings are only, usually maybe 40 by 40 for the most part, very small terminal buildings. It's time for us to go beyond that now. Expansion of the airport in Congo Town and improvement. Also contracts for the road works. The water installation is taking place in Deep South right now. So we're going to need some work to be done to the roads in South Andros. Once again, land title issue is a big one. Improvement to the administrator's building. The government assistance with the ferry service, member for Southern Shores, is a big issue for Central and between South and Mangrove Key. I'm going to need your intervention there, sir, at the central government level, because the issue of subvention has been one that persons have been talking about for some time now. We don't know when the ferry is going to come, and the payment issue has not been settled. I know recently we had another settlement, but I still think that it's only almost a band-aid situation for the most part. And the mail boat subvention is a big issue. Mr. Speaker, in my final 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker, young and middle-aged Bahamians alike who are employed in state-owned enterprises such as BPL, ZNS, the Water and Sewage Corporation in Bahamas Air, are reticent, and there's a need, and maybe for some concern, over the issue of job security and their future. And it is not a matter that this member takes lightly. They need only look at the BTC debacle as a good reference point. Before the sale at Batelco, many of these Bahamians lived out east and out west, Seabreeze, Blair, Glenison Gardens, and boom. Due to VSEP or forced and retirement packages, their lives, their children's lives, and their family members were all uprooted, disrupted, and changed tremendously. Mr. Speaker, the establishment of NHI and that same public, that parallel public service that some has coined as being, gave hope to our people. Many of our people in the Family Islands especially are depending on a little government job to survive or simply have a morsel of food. I once again ask our Prime Minister and his government, in the spirit of decency, human dignity, Christian understanding and love, to save the people, to save the woman them, to save the young man them. Things are tough out there, Mr. Speaker. Give our people a hand. Do not say someone's contract expired and let them go home. Mr. Speaker, this is a rough time to be unemployed in our society. But for the grace of God, go I. Mr. Speaker, in my final seconds, I would like to end as I begun by expressing thanks and gratitude to Dame Marguerite for a government speech from the throne. And once again, may God grant her excellent and good health, everlasting beauty, continued effervescence, and continuous spirit as a matriarch of this great country. We love you, Dame Marguerite, from the hill to the valley. May God bless you, Your Excellency, and may God's continual blessing flow on this great Commonwealth. I support the resolution, Mr. Speaker, and I'm much obliged. Thank you very much.
As many. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on this day at this time to thank the Governor General for her speech from the throne. In that speech, which was delivered on the 24th of May 2017 in Rawson Square, the People's Square, the Governor General outlined the government's agenda for this session of Parliament. The speech was informative. The speech was uplifting. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, the speech gave the people of the Bahamas hope that good governance was once again returning to the shores of the Commonwealth. Mr. Speaker, the Governor General made mention in her speech that the mandate given to her government on the 10th of May 2017 was a mandate for change. She stated that this change manifested itself in the very large number of new faces in Parliament. A rudimentary count reveals that 30 of the 39 members have never served in this House before. So, Mr. Speaker, apologies in advance for those of us that stumble and sometimes fumble as we learn the rules of this House. Mr. Speaker, I am one of these new members. I have never worked in the public service in my life. And until I was nominated as a candidate for the great constituency of Freetown, I never ever wanted to be a politician. My business was doing well. I was contributing to my community through community service. I was having fun by being vocal and outspoken on the radio and the newspapers. I was in a good place. But as I looked around me, I saw my country being pushed in the wrong direction by a group of politicians who were trying, but not actually succeeding, as evidenced by the 4 downgrades, in improving the daily lives of the majority of Bahamians. My presence here today is because of the great and strong and determined constituents of Freetown who felt my passion, observed my hard work and perseverance, recognized my contribution to this country in the area of business and commerce and job creation, and decided to take a chance on me and vote me into this House on the 10th of May 2017, in overwhelming numbers, I might add. The people of Freetown want what everyone wants. They want jobs. They want an opportunity to make a decent living. They want to live in a safe environment devoid of constant attacks on their life and well-being by disrespecting criminals. And they want a decent infrastructure. roads, schools, and a clean environment. Mr. Speaker, I want my constituents to know that even though they don't see me as much as they did during the campaign, I am working extremely hard on their behalf. I hold office hours all day on most Saturdays, where I see 30 to 40 constituents at a time, helping them address the concerns they may have. I hold constituency meetings monthly. In fact, I hold one on this night a week ago at Uriah McPhee Primary School, where I interact with constituents in a group setting. Over the summer, I installed air conditioning in the church hall of St. Margaret's Church on Kemp Road so that we could hold reading classes for about 30 children from the neighborhood and thereby improve their literacy skills. I hired a young lady in my constituency office with an English and literature major to help my constituents with the writing of a resume and the development of their interviewing skills to improve their chances of success as they look for a job. To date, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to report that after just 2 months since its inception, 100 members of the Freetown constituency have taken advantage of this free service. I sponsored a local basketball team, the Freetown Ringers. You know a washing machine is ring? The Freetown Ringers. Covering 3 age groups and involving at least 50 boys and young men, which competed in the community over a number of months and emerged victorious in the under-15 category and came second in the under-18 category, only to be beaten by Engliston. I welcome students back to Uriah McPhee and Andy Thompson on the first day of school after touring the buildings and the grounds to ensure that the air conditioning was fully operational. Thank you, member of South Beach. And all school repairs were progressing according to plan. I remind my dear friend, the Member of Parliament for South Beach and the Minister of Education, that the air conditioning in the Kemp Road Library has not been working since 2016, and so no after-school programs can take place in that facility at this time. I purchased over 700 backpacks with school supplies to help the kids of Freetown prepare for the first day of school. I worked diligently and quickly to ensure that a cleanup exercise was initiated as quickly as possible in the constituency, and I'm now happy to report that many Freetown young men and women have been engaged in that exercise on a permanent basis. I have talked to hundreds of constituents, taken hundreds of calls, helped a number of constituents secure employment in the private sector, and done my endeavor best to ensure that I am an active, responsive, and accessible representative. So once again, Mr. Speaker, I thank the people of Freetown for their support, and I continue to consider it an honor to sit in this great and historic House and serve in this Parliament on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, as you know, I was appointed the Minister of Tourism on the 15th of May 2017, and in her speech from the throne, the Governor General dedicated a significant portion of that speech to discuss matters tourism, as noted by the honourable member from Exuma and Ragged Island. The member is an exceedingly bright and a shining star in the opposition. He has real leadership potential. What I like about him is that he understands business, like me. He is a successful businessman, like me. He was president of the Chamber of Commerce, like me. As such, I am sure that he understands that before you develop the strategies for your portfolio, you have to study the numbers, get the lay of the land, determine the current state of affairs, figure out the hand that you've been dealt. Only then can you act, because to do so before completing this exercise would result in an exercise in futility. Well, Mr. Speaker, that is what I've been doing over the last 4.5 months. And here is my assessment and my goals for the future. Tourism continues to be, and will remain for the foreseeable future, the engine of our economy. Everyone is familiar with the statistics. Everyone knows that. Foreign visitors coming into our country, whether by air or by sea, generate 77% of all US dollars that we have, accounts for over 50% of all jobs presently had by our citizens today, contributes 44% to our overall gross domestic product, or GDP, and is directly responsible for 14% of all government revenue. In 2016, the Bahamas drew a whopping 6.2 million visitors to our shores, more than any other Caribbean destination. For the first 8 months of 2017, January to August, Preliminary numbers suggest that the Bahamas enjoyed 4.3 million visitor arrivals compared to 4.4 million in 2016, a decrease of 2.8%. Despite this slight decrease, tourist arrivals have grown by almost 3% over the past 17 years, since 2000. But since 2011, Caribbean tourist arrivals have grown at a rate of 4.3%, while our tourist arrivals have grown at a rate of 2.3%. In short, while we continue to have the most tourist arrivals of any Caribbean country, our rate of growth is almost half that of our brothers and sisters to the south. The Bahamas is seemingly losing some of its allure as a destination of choice as travelers become more adventurous and venture further south for something new, something different. Traditionally, the Ministry of Tourism has used the increasing arrivals of foreign visitors to indicate the health of the Bahamian tourism sector. But I question whether this is really the correct metric for measuring tourism performance. Rather than focusing on the number of arrivals alone, our focus should be on the economic value of those arrivals. The real metric that matters is total spend. Or more simply, let us take the number of visitor arrivals, let us multiply that number by how much we estimate that these foreign visitors spend once in the Bahamas, and let us calculate the total spend of these foreign visitors. Mr. Speaker, I love numbers, especially when you're talking about the people's money. And I performed this exercise, and what I learned was quite troubling. In the year 2000, the total spend by tourists in the Bahamas was $2.4 billion. Year 2000, $2.4 billion. In 2015, some 15 years later, the total spend by tourists in the Bahamas, once adjusted for inflation, had only grown to $2.5 billion. 2.4 in 2000, 15 years later, it's to 2.5. Total spend has remained constant in spite of surging arrivals. Why? Because the total amount that the foreign visitor is spending once they get here is plummeting. Visitor arrivals have grown by 48%, or 2 million persons since 2000, from 4.1 million to 6 million. But the average spend per visitor has declined 28%, from $586 in 2000 to $422 in 2015, meaning that the declining spend per visitor has significantly offset the total arrival growth for the past 15 years. Thus, there has been no growth whatsoever in the number of dollars and cents these extra foreign visitors are dropping into our economy. If you drill further into what makes up the 6 million foreign visitors that come to our shores, you will see that 1.5 million are stopover visitors and 4.5 million are cruise ship visitors. Naturally, the stopover visitor is much more valuable than the cruise passenger. Stopover visitors are those that typically travel to the Bahamas by air, take a taxi to their hotel, rent a room, purchase lots of food and beverage in restaurants, and drop some money in our casino or retail or nightlife options during their 3 to 4 night stay. The average stopover visitor spends $1,500 during their visit. Conversely, the average cruise ship passenger spends only $69 during their 6 to 12-hour stay. So we can all agree that the stopover visitor is more valuable than the cruise visitor, $1,500 versus $69. But the problem is that the number of stopover visitors has not grown in 30 years, remaining at approximately 1.5 million for that entire period. Any growth in our tourist arrival numbers has come from an increase in the number of cruise passengers, who we now know spends far, far less than the more desirable stopover visitor. In fact, our statistics reveal that cruise ship passengers make up 75% of our foreign visitors, yet they only account for 12% of the total spend. 75%, but only 12%. On the other hand, stopover visitors only make up 25% of our foreign visitors, yet they represent a whopping 88% of the total spend. Put another way, cruise ship passengers spend approximately $300 million in our country each year, as opposed to the stopover visitors that spend $2.2 billion. Why, one might ask, are we providing millions upon millions in incentives to the cruise ship industry when the spending of their passenger pales in comparison to the passengers board here by air? Mr. Speaker, as you can imagine, therefore, the primary goal of the Ministry of Tourism is to grow the number of stopover visitors using a number of different initiatives. Mr. Speaker, we are encouraged that Atlantis is slowly bringing the 600 rooms of the Coral Towers, which were closed on the 15th of December 2016 for a multi-million-dollar renovation upgrade, back on stream. About half of the rooms are back in operation, and the remaining rooms should be back into service in April 2018. Mr. Speaker, we are also encouraged that Bahama is slowly bringing its 2,300 rooms on stream. Naturally, we would like them to move faster, but we understand that if you wish to deliver world-class service and a world-class product, these deliverables take time. I have been reliably informed that the employee headcount has just surpassed 3,000 Bahamians, and with the real grand opening plan for April 2018, I am told that a total of 5,000 Bahamians will ultimately be employed at that property. Before anyone on the other side jumps up and starts stating that we are reaping what they sowed, may I remind the Bahamian public that this project is now 2 years behind schedule, and the cost of this delay in lost wages, in lost opportunities, and lost economic activity is probably just north of $2 billion. But as the old adage goes, better late than never. Recognizing the importance of stopover visitors, this government will expeditiously seek to approve all room-enhancing projects that make sense, are environmentally friendly, and create unique and innovative experiences for their guests. I want all investors, both Bahamian and non-Bahamian, who are now thinking of building hospitality-related projects, that you now have in place a government that is extremely interested in creating employment opportunities for its people by expanding the tourism sector. I can honestly say that I have a prime minister who has a good business head and who easily sees and understands the potential where potential exists. So the decision-making process is far more streamlined. And if you run into bureaucratic delays, just call me. I am, after all, a businessman, and I understand better than most that time is money. In addition, given that the cruise ship passengers coming to our shores have been ever increasing, yet their spend per person has been ever decreasing, another goal of the Ministry of Tourism will be to reverse this downward trend. I challenge our local entrepreneurs to figure out ways to develop and create fun and innovative and interesting excursions to offer the 4.5 million cruisers that touch down mostly in Providence and Grand Bahama each year. The Ministry of Tourism has done an excellent job attracting these types of visitors to our country, but we have failed to fully leverage the opportunities this has created. I will be creating a unit within the ministry to facilitate negotiations between these individuals/companies that are interested in doing business with cruise lines, and will try to convince the Minister of Finance to adjust the duties and other taxes to motivate cruisers to do more of their shopping here rather than down in the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, no one can argue that the way in which visitors purchase their vacations has changed. In the past, travelers would go to their travel agents to book their travel plans. The Bahamas built overseas offices, bricks and mortar, to market to these travel agents so that they could, in turn, sell the idea of a vacation to the Bahamas to those persons coming into the travel agency. Mr. Speaker, over 70% of our foreign visitors come from the United States, and statistics reveal that 67% of all vacations purchased by Americans are now done so online. In addition, Mr. Speaker, in 6 short years, some 50% of all the world's travelers will be millennials, born between 1980 and the year 2000. Unlike the older generation who viewed travel as a luxury, millennials see travel almost as a basic human right. Millennials give less priority to material things. They value authentic experiences that teach them valuable life lessons. They are adventurous, desiring to see the wonders of the world, participate in local adventures, explore the unique culture and heritage of the host country they visit. Here are some interesting facts about millennials. 76% say friend recommendations are top influences for travel. 80% feel travel reviews have a strong influence on their decisions. Only 18% consider travel agent advice. 87% look to Facebook for travel inspiration. 46% book travel through a smartphone or tablet. 85% check multiple sites before booking to get the best deal possible. 97% will post their experiences on social media. 49% take last-minute vacations. Mr. Speaker, we must change the way we do business. Why? Because our foreign visitors have changed the way they shop. In these times of tight budgets, in these times of limited resources, we must direct our scarce marketing dollars to strategically target those that surf the web in search of a Caribbean holiday. That's the new reality. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we have the Ministry of Tourism, the Nassau Paradise Island Promotion Board, the Grand Bahama Promotion Board, the Out Island Promotion Board, the individual hotels, all spending marketing dollars to grow demand to the country. Preliminary estimates are that between $50 to $60 million is being spent annually to market the country. But the numbers reveal that despite all this spending, our stopover visitors are not growing, probably because our message is confusing, and probably because our marketing dollars are spread too thinly over too many pots to be effective. As a result, Mr. Speaker, I will push for the pooling of all of these resources to allow for the more efficient and effective spending on our marketing message. As an example, each of the aforementioned entities all have their own websites. Would it not be more effective for all of these websites, which are all costing thousands upon thousands of dollars to operate and manage, to all collapse into Bahamas.com? The tourism sector is now mercilessly competitive, and we must guard our marketing dollars jealously to ensure that they are spent on ensuring that any search on the World Wide Web for any destination in the Caribbean leads them back to the Bahamas. Yeah. Unfortunately, more and more that is being allocated to tourism is being eaten up in salaries and overheads. I have entered into a discussion with the Minister of Finance to compartmentalize the amount of tourism's budget that must be spent on overseas marketing, not to be touched for any politically expedient exercise like hiring almost 25 persons days before a general election. In addition, the Ministry of Tourism has re-engaged Weber Shandwick as its public relations company. The senior executives in tourism were screaming for this to happen. And while they appreciated they learned a great deal by not having a PR agency, the time was ripe for re-engagement. I am sure that the member for Exuma and Ragged Island would appreciate that neither he nor I are experts in the field of tourism. I am an expert in washing clothes. And the honorable member is an expert in life and health insurance. So when the experts in tourism, both in the ministry and in industry, approached me and literally begged me to rehire a PR agency, I was minded to do so. I cautioned the member from Exuma and Ragged Island not to get sucked into the narrative that we should keep the public relations in-house. It may sound good in this new world that we both call politics, but it just does not make good business sense. Look around us, and we will see that this function is better outsourced. And that is why great companies like Google and Nike and General Motors and Ford and almost all of the tourism ministries of the Caribbean have a PR agency when they are quite able to afford to bring this function in-house. Weber Shandwick works in 81 countries and 120 cities around the world, and they were the most awarded PR company in 2016. They represent such companies as Google and Nike, and they are extremely familiar and very clearly understand the complexity of marketing a country with 16 different destinations. They have assigned young, energetic, dynamic individuals to our account to assist in strategy, digital content development, social media enhancement, paid and amplified messages on the web, crisis management, i.e. getting the word out after hurricanes that we are open for business, the development of new concepts and ideas and analytics. No government ministry should be minded to keep PR in-house, since government ministries are by definition static, focused on permanent employment, and PR agencies survive by constantly evolving. In addition, at the beginning of this month, the Ministry of Tourism has engaged a company by the name of Tambourine as its advertising agency of record. This company is currently the advertising agency of record for the Out Island Promotion Board, signaling an intimate knowledge of our product offerings, and possesses a strong foothold in the U.S. and Latin America, a market where we see a great deal of growth potential. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot more that I could talk about under the tourism umbrella, but time does not permit, so let me move on to the aviation sector. Mr. Speaker, I get in there. The march towards the establishment of the Bahamian airspace is ongoing. All of us in this great chamber are aware the airspace above our entire country is neither controlled by us nor officially recognized as the airspace of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the only country in the region to suffer such an injustice. I've informed the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, the international body that governs such applications for control of airspace. Hold it, I get to you. I know. For control of airspace, that I want the airspace above our country to be recognized as our airspace. And I have also asked them to facilitate meetings between our surrounding space, the United States, Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and the Turks and Caicos Islands, so that negotiations of where their airspace ends and our airspace starts can be concluded. With a leadership election coming up in the PLP, I think it is only appropriate that I thank the former Minister of Aviation, the current member of Engliston,
Next leader, Progressive Liberal Party.
for doing what she did to start this process. I want her to rest assured that what she started under the PLP will be concluded under the F&M. One of the few shining examples of where both parties work together for the betterment of the Bahamian people. For Mr. Speaker, oh yeah. For Mr. Speaker, when we establish the Bahamian airspace, this will create numerous opportunities for high-paying, specialized jobs and setting up the infrastructure to manage our airspace and then managing the airspace once set up. We are hoping, Mr. Speaker, in this new world where we control our airspace, to look at LPIA and create that as a hub for foreign airlines. We feel that that setting up that airport as a hub will create enormous opportunities. We are 185 miles from the United States. If you think about it, MIA, Miami International Airport, has an economic impact of $40 billion. $40 billion. The fuel is cheaper here. We have a pre-clearance facility here. We can add additional runway space at LPIA. And we feel that we can have a substantial economic impact on our country by developing LPIA. We can also subsidize smaller airlines, like they do in the US, from this money to travel to the south and to better service our southern islands. Mr. Speaker, our 28 family island airports require over $200 million in infrastructural improvements, and securing airlift into these islands is the key component to the development of our touristic product there. The Inter-American Development Bank has provided us with funding to begin the improvement of these airports, and top of the list is Exuma. North Eleuthera, Bimini, and San Salvador, recognizing that the busiest airport in the Family Islands is now Marsh Harbor, which has already been upgraded, although it does rather frustratingly need a longer runway. The Minister of Finance has tabled a resolution to borrow $35 million from the Inter-American Development Bank to commence these improvements, and I can report that plans are being finalized on the airport in Georgetown. I've ordered these plans to be revisited to ensure that the airport infrastructure is sufficient to take into account the growth projections that we see for that island, and to ensure that all commercial opportunities that are being properly exploited in the design space. Airports represent wonderful opportunities for commercial activity, and unlike Marsh Harbor Airport, we need to ensure that this airport provides as many opportunities as possible for small businesses to start and thrive. Bahamas Air. Mr. Speaker, while the audited financials for the year ended June 30th, 2017 are not yet completed, Bahamas Air is projected to lose over $22 million as opposed to $16.6 million for the year ended June 30th, 2016. The increase in the loss can be attributed to the $1.9 million in additional training costs for the pilots to learn how to fly the 5 new ATRs, and $5.8 million in closing costs on a new $120 million loan that Bahamas Air took out when it acquired the 5 new ATR aircrafts. Bahamas Air currently employs 690 people for 8 aircraft, and staffing costs represent 42% of total revenue. which is almost twice as much as the industry average of 20 to 25%. The sad fact, Mr. Speaker, is that when politicians control companies, there is a tendency to overstaff under the belief that somehow that secures votes and victories at the polls. Time and time again, that has been proven wrong, and I wish that all politicians would stop meddling in the workings of state-owned companies to the detriment of the taxpayer. However, Mr. Speaker, my views on Bahamas Air have changed. Having been intimately involved in the airlift evacuation from the southern islands, I thank the great God above that we had Bahamas Air to assist. In addition, as I toured these facilities, my Minister of Finance can put me in my place later, but I expect that. In addition, as I toured these facilities at the Lyndon Pindling International Airport, I appreciated the enormous opportunities Bahamas Air provides Bahamians to be intimately involved in the aviation sector. So my private sector background may have caused me to lean towards not supporting Bahamas Air because of its enormous burden on the state. I do understand that it has a vital national security and nation-building role to play. Mr. Speaker, we must, however, reduce its enormous losses. And given that the loss will go up even further when we start to repay that $120 million loan in September 2018, it is completely within the realm of any right-thinking Bahamian to ponder when is enough enough. As a result, the board at Bahamas Air has been charged with developing new routes to Cape Haitian, which has started on the 5th of September, and Houston, which is supposed to start on the 15th of November, but it is now being reevaluated given the devastating effects of Hurricane Harvey on that city. In addition to these enormous subsidies to Bahamas Air, is allowing them to keep prices artificially low to the detriment of private operators that are struggling to survive in the air transportation business in the Bahamas. I intend to sit down with all parties to see how they can all operate and remain financially viable despite the subsidies passed on to Bahamas Air by the state. Mr. Speaker, the final area I intend to talk about this morning is the gaming board. When anyone states that public officers are underpaid, I want them to look closely at the gaming board as an example of where this is simply not the case. Mr. Speaker, when I arrived on the scene, there were 4 individuals being paid in excess of $200,000 per annum, after you factored in all their pay, bonuses, gratuities, and allowances. There was 1 individual taking home in excess of $150,000, and there were numerous other senior executives earning between $80,000 and $100,000 per annum. And shortly after the general election, the previous board and management were conducting a salary review and proposing some new salary scales, which were eye-popping because I am a cabinet minister and I only make $71,000. The secretary was to make $192,500. The deputy secretary was to earn $121,000. And the new category of 7 executives was to make $110,000. So if you're thinking of a job in the public service, when you're finished here, you know where to go. And one would think that with all that compensation being splashed about, it would be the best run, well-oiled arm of the state. But there have been no audited financials since the 30th of June 2015. And I found it to be a very dysfunctional organization with lots of infighting amongst the senior executives and delivering its service at much the same speed as the rest of the civil service. That having been said, Mr. Speaker, the dynamics of the modern-day gaming industry in the Bahamas and the rapidly changing aspects of the national gaming marketplace has radically transformed the gaming industry in our country since 2014. The old numbers business are now gaming houses, and collectively these emerging concerns are employing a significant number of Bahamians. However, the number of Bahamians that dare to gamble continues to grow and grow and grow. And naturally, this is of growing concern to the government. I've had a chance to review the financial statements of the gaming houses, and the profits reporting are eye-popping. With a moratorium in place to prevent any new companies from entering the market, the 8 remaining gaming houses continue to enjoy the benefits of being a cartel, in much the same way as the 5 clearing banks do. In addition, there is consolidation underway among the gaming houses, where the biggest player is seemingly gobbling up the smaller players, And while there may be 8 gaming houses in the public domain, some of the gaming houses have the same owners. With the gaming houses being so cash rich and the government being so cash strapped, fulfilling its requests for social services and education, I'm sure that the Minister of Finance will be looking to enhance his tax revenues from this sector. As such, Mr. Speaker, the Gaming Board will be entering into discussions with the gaming houses to see how best this can be done. In addition, we all know that many Bahamians are addicted to gaming, playing numbers and participating in casino-type games like spinning all day and night, much to the detriment of their families and their own financial well-being. The Gaming Board will be pushing the gaming houses to become more creative in controlling out-of-control gambling. After all, if they are smart enough to get Bahamians to gamble more, then surely the gaming houses have the smarts to control chronic gamblers. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the fact that clearing banks are closing branches throughout the archipelago and leaving numerous islands without any banking facilities at all, gaming houses are unintentionally or intentionally becoming the easiest and cheapest way to move cash throughout the islands. Mr. Speaker, this is worrying because this type of unregulated cash movement without any KYC, know your customer regimes in place, will surely, at some time, set off some alarm somewhere in the world in one of those organizations that can put us on some list, typically known as the blacklist, and injure our ability to conduct banking relationships overseas. As such, Mr. Speaker, the Gaming Board will consult with the authorities of the Central Bank to determine how best to move forward on this issue, to ensure that the gaming houses do not negatively impact the stability of our financial sector. Mr. Speaker, I have talked enough. As you can see, there's lots to do, and I can honestly say that this is the hardest job that I've ever had in my entire life. But Mr. Speaker, I love the challenge, and I wish to once again thank the great constituents of Freetown for this chance to serve, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise on behalf of the people of the great constituency of Southern Shores.
Yes.
I continue to be humbled and feel privileged at the vote of confidence reposed in me. I therefore thank God and all the people of Southern Shores for my presence in this honorable place. I wish upfront, Mr. Speaker, to reassure my beloved constituents of my intent to faithfully serve them, continue to be accessible, and to be a strong advocate and intercessor for them. And at this point, Mr. Speaker, this might be a good point for me to allay some fears and concerns that they may have as a result of buzzing social media and mainstream media. Mr. Speaker, pardon?
You brought the midget?
Mr. Speaker, on the weekend, I had the privilege to travel with the Deputy Prime Minister, a number of other ministers, on behalf of the government of the Bahamas, in search of innovation, technology, etc., for the advancement of our people. And while there, to my surprise, I received information that I had fled the country. I had gone down south, all emanating from comments that I would have made in May of this year, shortly after the general election, on the Darrell Miller show. Mr. Speaker, I find it amazing that in my 50 years of existence, I've never had to defend my attachment to my heritage. Mr. Speaker, science has advanced to the extent where parents are able to choose the color of the eyes of their children, choose the sex of their children, and other physical attributes. But to my knowledge, there has been no science that helps to decide for a child who his or her parents will be. And to that extent, I give thanks to Almighty God for who my parents are. There are many who may relate to having suffered certain indignations as a young person. The term Haitian boy was commonplace for me. I grew up accepting who I am without making any excuses. And even at this point in my life, when I tell those stories, it's not in search of sympathy. Mr. Speaker, I'm not in need of sympathy. But I tell those stories with the hope that maybe one person who might now find themselves in the position that I would have been in then will realize that it is not where you begin, but it is where you end. With God's help, I had the opportunity to travel in and out of the country from a teenager. I joined the police force, I served my country, and there was never any question as to the loyalty, my loyalty to my beloved Bahama land.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, unlike many of my cousins, I had the good fortune of being born here in 1967. Here in 1967. So, Mr. Speaker, when that flag was raised on midnight, July 10th, 1973, I would have been 6 years and 9 days old. I would have had the opportunity of being on the fort when the Queen and the Prince visited and drove on the back of a Jeep. I would have been standing there, Mr. Speaker, in my William Gordon Primary School uniform. Mr. Speaker, while I am not at all in any way, form, or fashion ashamed or embarrassed of my Haitian heritage, I want to say to the good people of Southern Shores who I have the privilege to serve that Frankie Alfred Campbell is as Bahamian as conch salad. Yes, I said I have 2 passports. Yes, I do. You see, with God's grace, having been appointed to the Bahamas Embassy in Port-au-Prince, Haiti in September of 2010, on the 26th day of September 2010, I was issued a diplomatic passport number ED 000143.
Amen.
And Mr. Speaker, that made me proud in many ways. Proud as an individual, proud realizing where I came from, but also proud to brag about my country having the generosity to provide equal opportunity for all.
Speak from your heart. Speak from your heart. Speak from your heart.
Mr. Speaker, that passport had a 10-year lifespan. Upon my being recalled from Haiti, no one asked for the passport. It was still valid, Mr. Speaker. I kept the passport, Mr. Speaker. I didn't use or abuse it, but I kept it as a source of pride and accomplishment. And then, God being the good God that He is, upon my appointment on the 15th of May as the Minister of Transport and Local Government, the passport office again issued me a diplomatic passport.
A red passport.
The red passport, this time number DA 000069. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, I have two passports. As a matter of fact, least I get in trouble. At this time, I'm holding three. Because of the two blue ones, one has the visa, and then I have the new e-thing. So, but you know,
Every cabinet member.
Mr. Speaker, let me say this.
And every MP.
I have some family members who are dismayed about all that has been said in the social media. And my sister called my wife, and she said, Catherine, I got to talk to Frankie because I don't know, he got to learn to stop talking. Stop talking. But I want to say to my sister, Jenny, that I didn't think it was an issue talking that which is true. I didn't think it was an issue talking that which I thought everybody knew.
All us
You see, all of us in here
got two passports.
got two of these. All of us in here have two of these.
Yes.
I want to put this baby to sleep, Mr. Speaker, if you would allow me. At no time in my 50 years of existence did I, Frankie Alfred Campbell, ever pledge allegiance to any other country than the Bahamas. Save and except for what we did here in the Bahamas between 1967, when I would have been born, and 1973, when we raised the flag.
All of us was.
Mr. Speaker, and as I close on this matter, I just want to say that I publicly give permission and authorization to any of our foreign embassies here in the Bahamas to supply whoever requests any evidence or proof that I ever held any other travel document or citizenship other than that of my beloved wife. Mr. Speaker, if I could get back to my good people of Southern China.
Honorable member, ordinarily I'd ask that the documents be brought up.
I can't afford to get catch without
but
this, Mr. Speaker.
in this circumstance, I wouldn't deprive you of your documents.
I can't afford to get catch without these. You see, even, Mr. Speaker, you see, even inadvertently, there are moments when you wonder if it's intentional. You know, my good friend, South Andros, spoke passionately about how things are changing at these wakes, and how certain cultural aspects are changing. And then he looks over to me and says, "That's right, Southern Shores. And I was wondering, I said, I wonder if he's suggesting that I causing these changes. So, Mr. Speaker, as much as I don't mind tabling these, I don't know if I could afford to be caught without them. Yeah, leave that alone. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report that Team Campbell has transitioned to a constituency office in Southern Shores with regular office hours and with regularity receiving the constituents of Southern Shores and with their myriad of concerns. And while we're unable to satisfy everybody because of the various constraints that exist, we have been successful, Mr. Speaker, in directing persons, albeit to social services or wherever else we are satisfied their concerns might be able to be addressed. We've had the good fortune, Mr. Speaker, even in this hard economy, to have assisted some persons in actual job placement. Mr. Speaker, we've entered into an agreement with Cybertech, where we are offering individuals who are presently unemployed in the Southern Shores constituency with the opportunity to improve their skills and become employable at our expense. Mr. Speaker, the political side, the Constituency Association continue to have their monthly meetings at the Galvantines Primary School. And while as the Member of Parliament, recognizing that I have this obligation, this holistic obligation, Mount Moriah, this holistic obligation, yes, I've instituted quarterly town hall meetings. And these quarterly town hall meetings bear no sign of politics. So much so, Mr. Speaker, at the last one, I pointed out to the persons present that my wife had a yellow handbag at the meeting. And we want to create that environment where we can all come together as a constituency and address the concerns and issues that are relative to us all. At our last town hall meeting, we had the good fortune of having representation from NEMA and the Met Office, who addressed the topic, hurricane preparedness and relief. And Mr. Speaker, I thought it was timely because shortly thereafter, we had the threats of the storms. And I was able to provide 5 or 6 loads of sand in the area. Skeptical that persons may not use it, Mr. Speaker, only to visit the entrance of Misty Gardens and to find that persons were coming from surrounding neighborhoods and constituencies because they would have had an appreciation for the experiences of recent time and would have been doing all that they could to adhere to the warnings of our Honorable Prime Minister and to take whatever necessary precautions that they can. Mr. Speaker, having heard and seen the concerns of the constituency, I want Southern Shores to be aware that I've had conversations with the Ministry of Environment about the illegal and indiscriminate dumping in the constituency, especially and predominantly in the Cowpen Road and Marshall Road areas. I've been given the assurance that contracts are in the process of being signed to ensure that all of our parks and verges are presentable. Amen. Amen, St. Barnabas. Mr. Speaker, I've had conversations with the Ministry of Environment about the roadside garages that continue to be a source of agony for the people in Millis Heights, for the good people in Meadows Boulevard, I actually had a conversation, Mr. Speaker, with one constituent, and I indicated that we're not against you earning a living. We support that. The government is broke, and we don't want to cause you to become one of those persons on the social services line. Thank you, Cat Island. Thank you, Cat Island. Mr. Speaker, and I indicated to the good constituent that if he were to confine his work to the confines of his property, and to put in the necessary barriers that will not create the kind of eyesore, I'm sure that his neighbors would support him, and many of them would even bring their cars for him to fix. So, Mr. Speaker, while we want persons to make a living, we want persons to also be conscientious of the neighborhood and the persons that live around. Mr. Speaker, we've also had conversations with the Ministry of Works, and we've gotten assurances from the ministry and the minister, who happens to be our neighbor in Carmichael. And Southern Shores can be assured that the Ministry of Works is aware of the concerns for seawalls, of the concerns for additional lighting, for the concerns for speed bumps, and they can be assured that I've been given the assurance that as resources become available, those matters will be addressed. During the summer, Mr. Speaker, I sponsored a tennis workshop. We have the privilege of having one of our coaches, Mr. Corey Francis, who held the workshop for a number of our youngsters. Reports indicate that it was very well received, and I want to thank Clear Solution, who also participated in donating the T-shirts for that tennis camp. We sponsored a summer camp, or we assisted in donating to a summer camp held by the church just next door to our headquarters. And we also had the awesome privilege of joining in with the police at the Carmichael Road Police Division, where we made a donation to their summer camp. And I must say, without prejudice or bias, that the police continue to have one of the best summer camps during the summertime, and they should be applauded for that. Mr. Speaker, like many other constituencies, we assisted with school supplies. But unlike those who went on the park and had a big outing, we chose the route of the knowledge we have of who may be in the greatest need, and we caused supplies, bags, and books, etc., to be taken to the various houses. The truth of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, while I point no finger at any particular individual, we all know of instances where sometimes items end up in places where there is no real need, or where the need is not as great as other places. Mr. Speaker, we've taken to the streets in Southern Shores. I've been asked the question, is it campaign time already? We've taken to the streets and we're knocking on doors on the weekends, because I, Mr. Speaker, do not wish to be associated with or likened to the 9 lepers who never came back. So I've been knocking on doors in Southern Shores, saying to the residents that I am grateful for the course of action that they took on May 10th, and reassuring them of my intent to remain connected. We're going to be having a number of programs on stream. I was pleased to hear about Freetown's basketball team. I want to say that we'll be looking for someone to form a baseball league. I've spoken with Carmichael. I'm going to speak with one or two of the other constituents. Golden Gates, you're invited. We're going to have this Southwest Baseball League to ensure that there is a positive alternative to engage. Bamboo, you're welcome. Golden Isles? Oh, Golden Isles. Golden Isles, you're welcome. Tall Pines? This is growing, Mr. Speaker. This is growing. This is growing. Mr. Speaker, I've had conversations with the R. Carmichael program. I have a great appreciation for the work that they've been doing in the entire Southwest, part of which includes Southern Shores. And I've made a commitment to the R. Carmichael that I will give at least 8 to 10% of my constituency allowance to that program, because I'm satisfied that it will reach the multitudes of the people that we all represent. Mr. Speaker, to the Ministry of Transport and Local Government, I want to join Freetown, who would have indicated that as a businessman, he saw the need to survey the land, so to speak. He saw the need to investigate what was there before determining a course of action. The Ministry of Transport has carriage of the Met Office, the Port Department, the Post Office, road traffic, and local government. All of these departments have great responsibility to ensure connectivity of our archipelago. Mr. Speaker, the Post Office have been the subject of much discussion prior to my taking office, and even more so in recent times, because as Her Excellency would have laid out in the speech from the throne, there is greater hope and expectation from this government. I note, Mr. Speaker, that in 2012, the end of the year, fiscal year 2012, revenue from the Post Office would have been some 4.72 million. And Freetown, this one is especially for you. And then I note that last year, Mr. Speaker, that revenue would have decreased to a little over 3 million. And Freetown, that is because from 2013, the Post Office staff at the General Post Office have been working for a half a day. It's difficult to make the same amount of money you would have made when you were working a full day while you're only working a half a day. The point I'm making is the potential of the Post Office to generate the revenue that we so badly need is there. But we have a responsibility to ensure that they have the resources that they need, Freetown. We have the responsibility to find some place to house the General Post Office that is humane, that is air-conditioned, that has working bathrooms, that has adequate parking, that has no fear of concrete falling on their heads, Freetown. Mr. Speaker, I am indeed grateful for the perseverance and commitment of the staff at the General Post Office. I've met with them on a few occasions. I've had the opportunity to meet with persons at the Shirley Street Post Office, the Cable Beach Post Office, and I want to assure the other satellite stations that I am en route. I am concerned about their well-being and the entire operation at the post office. I have had the opportunity to look around, and I'm satisfied that it won't be long before I have the privilege of coming back to this place and announce that we have a permanent, suitable house for the General Post Office. Local government, Mr. Speaker. Shortly after being appointed, I had to use all my energy to ensure that local government elections were held and held on time. I was even offered assistance from my predecessor and good parishioner, and so I want to join Freetown in saying that there are occasions when the opposition and the government can work together for the betterment of its people. And I invite, wherever those occasions exist, that we continue in that vein. Mr. Speaker, we last week held a leadership conference for our administrators, chief counselors, and their assistants, with the view of ensuring that as we connect the islands through local government, we are all reading from the same hymn sheet. We are all following the same protocols. Because you see, in the speech from the throne, Her Excellency also gave indication that steps are being taken to ensure that local government is brought here to New Providence. And in that conference, that leadership conference, while we focus on individual districts, we ensured that part of this discussion was geared towards identifying the weaknesses, the deficiencies in what presently exists, because the family islanders have the opportunity to present New Providence with a product that has been refined, with a product that is user-friendly, with a product that will benefit the constituents of New Providence. Beg your pardon? If you didn't receive an apology, I want to personally, an invitation. I want to personally apologize. My instructions were that my parliamentary colleagues, including senators, when I say parliamentary colleagues, were extended an invitation. So I apologize for whatever communication breakdown there was. Mr. Speaker, we have... Mr. Speaker, we are working intentionally and deliberately towards bringing local government to New Providence. I've been approached by a number of private citizens who've expressed an interest, and I want to invite all and sundry to be informed that public discussions will begin as early as the end of this month. I believe on the 19th of this month, there will be a preliminary report presented by the IDB on some work that has started in that regard. And thereafter, I invite all and sundry to add their 2 cents to ensure that as far as possible, the next time we have local government elections, it will include New Providence. The Port Department, Mr. Speaker, the Port Department is our regulatory body for all of our maritime affairs throughout the Bahama archipelago. They have their challenges, Mr. Speaker. Among their challenges is knowing that there is an abundance of revenue out there to be collected, but they've not been properly equipped and furnished with the necessary resources to go out there and collect those revenues. I want to say to the staff at the Port Department that I am in discussion with the Minister of Finance, the good member for East End, and I have some assurances that relief is on the way, because we want those revenues throughout the Keys and wherever else they may be to end up in the Treasury of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, Her Excellency made reference to taxi plates in her speech. And shortly thereafter, my predecessor came to me lamenting and offering to supply me with Panadols and Aleve because of the headache she anticipates I will be faced with. You don't come to St. Matthews. That's why. But Mr. Speaker, let me say that the Road Traffic Department is moving forward with the animated system. The Road Traffic Department is still taking some blows, if I may use a colloquial term. It's still taking some blows because the system still has some hiccups, especially as it relates to our family islanders, who, Mr. Speaker, find it unconscionable that they would have to pay for an airline ticket to collect a driver's license that costs $20. I've been given a number of explanations for the delay. I'm being told that we're waiting on some assistance from BTC to make sure the machine is internet ready. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that I give my commitment to following through to ensure that if we, on the one hand, are promoting local government, we must be able, on the other hand, to supply those local districts with something as simple as a driver's license without them having to leave their district. On the question of taxi plates, jitney plates, and all other plates, I learned early in my security training that if you meet a wall erected, before you break down the wall, seek to find out why this wall was erected. Yes. I met in place, Mr. Speaker, a moratorium, dirty word amongst taxi drivers, a moratorium. Yes. And 5 years you left it with me. Yes. Yes. Mr. Speaker, I've caused to be commenced a review, an audit, to find out what it is we have out there in terms of plates before any other consideration could be given. There are some who suggest just add 100 more plates. Just give plates to the persons who are leasing. But Mr. Speaker, while I'm not the astute businessman like Freetown and Exuma and Ragged Island, I'm satisfied, Mr. Speaker, on the face of it, that there are some hardships now being experienced in that industry. Hardships that result in taxi drivers lining up from the night before out here on the wharf and sleeping in their vehicles to try to ensure that they get a good spot in the line for the following day. So my belief is, Mr. Speaker, if I were to just add 100 more plates, that would just be 100 more persons on that line, sleeping in their vehicles, trying to find a good place on the line. Mr. Speaker, I realize, even with the busing system that we have so many complaints about, that in great part, it is as a result of the hustle that is in the industry. Persons having to hustle to make demand money before they could make their money. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm in search of a real sustainable way of removing the hustle from the industry. I believe if I'm successful in removing the hustle, there are great dividends to be earned. First of all, people will find it easier to comply. People will find it easier to take a day off and spend some time with their families. People will find it easier to sleep home instead of being on the line at night. People will find it easier to behave seemingly in the front of the tourists and not have to fight over a fare. And that will bring joy to Freetown in his quest to bring more repeat and overnight guests. And then, Mr. Speaker, you could see the further rippling effect. So while it is taking some time, I assure persons that I don't want just another knee-jerk reaction that will not be sustainable and that would put me in a position of having to hand over to whoever will assume from me the same horrible situation that I met in place. Mr. Speaker, common among all of the departments in the Ministry of Transport is this whole question of succession planning. And as I move to the Met Office, I think this is a perfect example where very little, if any, regard was given to the need for proper succession planning. The truth of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that science that I spoke about earlier has still not given us the assurance that we will not die. People will die, Mr. Speaker. Those of us who have management of various departments or institutions must make provision for that possibility. The Met Office, Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by thanking those hard-working, dedicated civil servants who, by virtue of the time put in, are now eligible to just go fishing or eligible to just stay home and play with their grandchildren. But, Mr. Speaker, we found it necessary to ask so many of them to stay on because no provision was made to ensure that there's someone to replace them. The matter is so dire, Mr. Speaker, that we have an office in Grand Bahama that calls for the minimum of 6 persons under normal circumstances to be operational. Mr. Speaker, I'm ashamed to report here that that Met Office in Grand Bahama is being run by 3 persons. And so should one of them eat a piece of my favorite fish, barracuda, and can't show up to work, Mr. Speaker, the whole operation will shut down. Now imagine the Met Office in Grand Bahama shutting down and what effect that will have on the airport and the arrivals of airlift, and what effect that will have on Freetown's quest to improve the number of stayover visitors. And so, Mr. Speaker, we see how all of these items are related and interconnected. We have about 16 persons who I'm told are being trained to be meteorologists and forecasters, but those persons are at least 2.5, 3 years from being certified. And so, Mr. Speaker, I hope that those persons who have continued to stay on will continue to lend us their service and their expertise until such time as we can replenish and rejuvenate that department, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've had many discussions with the BMA, the Port Authority, the LJM Maritime Academy. And in this short time, I've come to the realization that we have overlooked an opportunity to expand our economy, to grow our economy through the maritime industry. You know, I had a conversation with the president of Carnival Cruise Lines, and he indicated to me that Carnival Cruise Lines hire near to 22,000 persons. And I said to him, well, for the amount of money that you make in the Bahamas, how many Bahamians do you hire? And his response, as if he was anticipating the question, was, Bahamians don't like to go out to sea. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that to be the truth, Mr. Speaker.
Descendant of pirates and buccaneers.
However, Mr. Speaker, I believe that maybe we haven't done a good enough job in exposing our young people to the industry or making it known the opportunities that exist in the industry. So I have committed, Mr. Speaker, while I am here, to try and put at least one Bahamian on every vessel that bears the Bahamian flag. Now, you know, the first time I said that, someone said to me, big man, don't bite off more than you could chew. I saw a quote the other day, and my response to that is, I would rather choke on greatness than to spend the rest of my life nibbling on mediocrity. Mr. Speaker, I don't have all the beautiful adjectives of my good friend from South Andros. So with his permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to borrow all of those beautiful adjectives that he used to describe and speak of Her Excellency Dame Marguerite. All those superlatives. Mr. Speaker, I had the honor and privilege as a young policeman in 1986 to be a part of the security team for the former Prime Minister, Sir Lyndon. I had the opportunity to observe his work ethic as a Prime Minister. But aside from that, Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to observe the faithfulness and diligence of a wife who was always there, of a wife who always had lunch ready at 1 o'clock. Mr. Speaker, I didn't have to guess what we were doing at 1 o'clock because we were taking Sir Lyndon home to have lunch. And I would have observed Her Excellency over those years, and she always displayed the same grace. And she brought that grace to Government House. And I want to personally thank her for what she would have done over the years and in more recent times, what she is doing at Government House. I want to thank her for her beautiful rendition of the speech from the throne, for the hope and inspiration that that speech has given to the Bahamian people. I want to give my personal commitment to doing as much as I possibly can to bring to realization and fruition that hope that would have been outlined in that speech. And I want to close by thanking the good people that sent me here and saying that Southern Shores supports the resolution.
As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Central Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, today I stand here through the grace of Almighty God and the support of the great constituents of Central Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, I beg your indulgence in allowing me to bring condolences to the family of Ken Motorboat Ferguson, who's laid to rest over the weekend, and to Larry Wildgoose, who laid his brother to rest over the weekend, and to all of the bereaved family under the sound of my voice or watching. May God grant you peace and comfort. Furthermore, I'm dressed in pink today in observance of Cancer Month, as I would have lost my father and several family members and friends to this dreaded disease. I just want to wear this to bring more awareness to that monster called cancer. Furthermore, as a former Olympian and a B3's executive, I would like to pay homage to Dr. Brendan Nottage, a giant of a man in politics and sports. CRIFTA was founded by Mr. Austin Seeley, but I was made the founder that Dr. Brendan Nottage was very instrumental in bringing the CRIFTA Games to the Bahamas. Next year's games will be held in the Bahamas, and I was pleased to find out that this great government, as confirmed by the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture and the B3A's president, that the games will be held in honor of Dr. Bernard Nottage. In advance of my comments on the speech from the throne, Mr. Speaker, I wish merely to say that I am in full support of this government, notwithstanding the challenges in our country, in assisting the people of Dominica to addressing mass devastation as a result of Hurricane Maria. As one who subscribes to Christian principles, I must say that at all times, we must be our brother's keeper, whether here in the Bahamas, Dominica, or in any other part of the world. Mr. Speaker, at some point in our lives, we were all children with great aspiration. And I'm sure that many of us would not object to remarks that in achieving our goals, there were family and friends who made significant contributions to our success, to which we are grateful. It is in this view and my belief that the people of Dominica, and in particular, the children and young adults who would have taken advantage of the opportunity to attend school in the Bahamas when their country was experiencing severe challenges, will not forget this country called the Bahamas in this display of charity to Dominica during a period when the country was overwhelmed with melancholy. We will forever be remembered as good Samaritans, as our brother's keeper. Mr. Speaker, when I addressed this honorable House the last time, there was perhaps marginal or no reference to severe weather storms. However, the implementation of appropriate actions to address social and economic challenges were extensively alluded to in many of my colleagues' communication. I note that today, the circumstance in the country differs from the last time I first spoke in this House. As just a few weeks ago, Hurricane Irma wreaked havoc on several southern islands of the Bahamas and contributed to the formation of tornadoes that caused damage to the island of Grand Bahama and Bimini, There is no doubt that the islands severely impacted were in the south. However, as I'm representing a constituency on the island of Grand Bahama, I would be remiss in not alluding to the infrastructural damages to private and public sector establishment from the tornado that touched down in central Grand Bahama and Marco City. The storm came and left mass destruction, but no lives were lost. The story of Job now comes to mind, where the Almighty God said to the enemy, "You may inflict punishment on him, but you cannot touch his life." The good Lord that we serve was with us before, during, and after the storm, as no lives were lost. Mr. Speaker, I question whether I should make reference to a major incident that occurred in my life since I last spoke in this honorable house. And after much contemplation, I noticed Foxit is laughing. I decided that this forum was most fitting to convey my sentiments, considering at that time I was in the wilderness of singlehood for a very long time. I am pleased to emphatically state that the good Lord has blessed me with a wonderful wife in the person of Heather Jasmine Time. Yes, sir. Oh, yes. Looking for a good night. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, it will be detrimental at this point for me to retract those statements. Hence, I would admonish my colleagues not to question how did that happen. Because the time between us meeting and getting married was very short, but indeed very powerful. I do. To my wife, I do express my gratitude for your love and support. And to my colleagues who were able to attend and those who offered apologies due to other commitments, I once again thank you all and I ask that you keep us in your prayers. Mr. Speaker, I align myself with my colleagues in extending gratitude to Her Excellency, the Governor General, for delivering the speech from the throne. And I note with interest our government's mandate to revive the struggling island of Grand Bahama, recognizing that a thriving Grand Bahama economy lends to a much better Bahamas. In lifting a quote from the speech, I note these powerful words. My government realizes that a healthy and strong Grand Bahamian economy is vital to the growth and development of the entire Bahamas. In part, the speech further said, my government is committed to the exploration and the development of the untapped resources of the island. Consequently, my government will promote diversification in tourism and banking and promote more Bahamian ownership of these industries. In keeping with that mandate, Central Grand Bahama has launched the Central Grand Bahama Eco-Adventure Parks and Economic Development Authority. This body is headed by a well-known businessman with assistance from a certified architect, a graphic artist, a quantity surveyor and scheduler, a certified forensic accountant, a renewable energy specialist, an environmentalist, and a landscape architect, along with other auxiliary support. It is also worth noting that the shoreline of Central Grand Bahama is blessed with a number of natural and man-made features. These elements will certainly add value to our effort at diversifying tourism. In highlighting a few of them, there's an inland fabled mermaid pond in Lewis Yard, and the story is told that some mermaid lived there 200 years ago. And I guess we have to go back and ask someone who lived during that time to confirm. There's a thriving bird sanctuary also in Lewis Yard. There is a lighthouse in Flinders Point, once used as a navigational aid. There's a natural pit along the shoreline of Seco Town, used for bonfires. And there's a vibrant boiling hole on the shoreline of Hebron Town in the 8 Mile Rock area. A few miles further west in 8 Mile Rock, we have a fern gully and an amazing underground cabin called Josie's Cave, to which my good member from West Grand Bahama and Bimini can confirm. Mr. Speaker, these theme parks will be developed by corporate and private citizens under a cooperative structure that will manage, maintain, and will be promoted by the authority. Interestingly, and as a result of the commitment of this government to promote transparency, the authority has already received financial commitment from several companies wishing to partner in this initiative, as they are optimistic that economic benefits will unfold to the island of Grand Bahama as a result of developing these parks. And I want to say thank you very much to the member from Marco City for highlighting this initiative last week during your presentation. I appreciate the kind words and look forward to working with you and all the other members. The speech also alluded to the government renewing the Family Island Incentive Act to promote growth in agriculture and manufacturing, and to support diversification and growth of agricultural produce among family islands so as to encourage and enhance inter-island trade. Again, in keeping with this mandate, we in Central Grand Bahama have launched the Central Grand Bahama Backyard Farming and Plant Nursery Bureau. This bureau is presently being spearheaded by a businessman along with other highly charged backyard farmers. Their mandate is fundamental, and that is to organize a bureau that encourages, regulate, and promote urban backyard farming for profit. In supporting this initiative, Central Grand Bahama will host weekend farmers market in which organically grown produce from Central Grand Bahama will be made available to all customers. You see, Mr. Speaker, in keeping with my government mandate, we are simply empowering the people, knowing that it is indeed the people's time. Central Grand Bahama is alive and well. Our office hours extend from 9 to 5 weekdays, and as a result of increase in visits, on Mondays we have extended our hours to 8 p.m. Mr. Speaker, I am certain that certain constituents will want me to highlight some of the activities that were undertaken in the great constituency of Central Grand Bahama. We have had back-to-school supplies issued. We have held a very successful summer basketball league that will be amplified moving forward. A cleanup campaign in partnership with city services, sanitation services, local government, private citizens, and other volunteers is ongoing. We recently reached an agreement on a building to be used as a community resource center and cyber cafe in Carvel Beach. We are indeed in dialogue with Harcourt Limited to address issues facing residents of Bahamia. We are also in the process of reestablishing the Bahamia Homeowners Association and identifying a green space for their public parks. While the activities mentioned are just a few to transform Central Grand Bahama, every effort is being made to ensure that the transformation is sustainable and built on the basis of skillfully placing one block and one section at a time until the whole is completed to the standard of the community, and invariably in support of efforts in advancing Grand Bahama to greater heights and within the framework of the government's mandate. Mr. Speaker, Hurricane Irma is a reminder of the necessity of constructing hurricane shelter or empowerment centers that can withstand the storms of today, whose wind speeds have been recorded in excess of 150 miles per hour. Being mindful of this information, Central Grand Bahama has engaged the assistance of architects and planners to conceptually design such a center that will be operated as a cooperative. In the center, we will have storage of shutters, the construction of shutters, water makers, multipurpose room, children play area, a radar tracking center that will adequately serve the need of a hurricane shelter. Purposely and properly built hurricane shelters are needed in this country now more than ever. Personally, I count it a privilege to have worked as a part of the Emergency Operations Center team, the EOC, in Grand Bahama. Further, I note the importance of such a committee and now have a better understanding of what it takes to prepare a nation for hurricane and the recovery thereafter. Going through the exercise in preparation for Hurricane Irma was indeed a frightening eye-opener. The teamwork displayed by my parliamentary colleagues and the various agencies are indeed worthy of praise. When we saw the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister for Grand Bahama, the member for Marco City, the member for West Grand Bahama and Bibini, the member for Pine Ridge, all at the EOC, working along with the various agencies, it spoke to the seriousness and importance, and I was very encouraged to be a part of that team. I must admit that my comprehension has increased as a result of being intimately involved in the preparation and aftermath of Hurricane Irma. Nevertheless, it is my view that there's room for improvement at recovery and restorative efforts. Mr. Speaker, while the main centers of economic growth did not get the full force of Hurricane Irma, and notwithstanding adequate preparations were made, I remain rooted to the idea of hurricane drills, as I mentioned in my maiden speech from this honorable House. Hence, I petition my government to consider having a week set aside every year during the month of April, May, or early June to carry out such an initiative. It's very important. This will ensure that by the time the hurricane season is in full force, among other things, our EOC will be up and running. It is better to have it and do not need it than to need it and do not have it. I really would like for the government to set aside a week for preparation, because that was a good drill that we went through, in spite of the fact that the hurricane didn't hit us with a full impact. On the capital work side, there are extensive damages to coastal roadways from west to east end. Potholes are in abundance, thus creating havoc on vehicular and pedestrian traffic. Flooding is also an issue of contention. I am pleased to note that teams are presently in Grand Bahama assessing the pothole menace, and within a few weeks, works will be mobilized to carry out the remedial coal patching, fixing of these potholes, and subsequently resurfacing as necessary. Mr. Speaker, I note particularly the roadway leading to 8 Mile Rock High School. There was a spot where a pothole consistently appeared. The Ministry of Works, at the beckoning of the good minister and member for Carmichael and the parliamentary secretary, who happened to be me, dispatched a team of engineers to carry out further examination of this recurring pothole. It was indeed very interesting that what was thought of as a pothole, Mr. Speaker, turned out to be a sinkhole. In order to address this issue, a company was hired to excavate an area 25 feet by 25 feet by 4 feet deep in the roadway to repair the sinkhole accordingly. I fail to think of what would have happened if we were not vigilant and had not this matter dealt with prior to school opening, or even to Hurricane Irma, as this road was heavily used because the 8 Mile Rock High School is not only heavy traffic by students and parents, this area was used as a hurricane shelter. So imagine going in and out, and we had 25 feet by 25 feet collapsing in the roadway. This would have created more damage than Hurricane Matthew. I thank you, Minister, for your attention to this matter and for the repairing of the same. The construction of Smiths Point seawall is progressing very well. According to our engineers and our on-site consultants, the quality of work produced by the new contractor are consistent with the expectations of the sponsor. During Hurricane Irma, parts of the protective barriers were compromised, resulting in sand being washed into the trenches. The contractor advised that this occurrence will result in a 2 to 3 weeks delay. Nevertheless, they still intend to complete this project by late February, early March, if all continues to go well. Mr. Speaker, as we are facing a steady rise in global warming, our sea is continuing to rise, and shorelines are continuing to erode. One way of mitigating coastal erosion is through the construction of seawalls. We must look at the southern shores of central Grand Bahama and, yes, West Grand Bahama to construct seawalls, breakwater systems, or any other structures that will arrest coastal erosion and prevent the constant washout of our roadways, our cemeteries, and our parks, and in some instances, our homes. In Grand Bahama, the Ministry of Works at present do not have a standalone compound with a necessary workshop to carry out basic capital works or to properly store materials. However, through the efforts of the Minister of Public Works and Utilities and the Minister with responsibility for public service, this matter is being addressed, and we hope that in short order, a compound will be in full force. Mr. Speaker, fellow parliamentarians, I would like to communicate a metaphor. I live in a house with 5 rooms, and I was chosen as the captain of my room. I know that there was a leak in the ceiling. However, after patching and painting over the roof, over the leak, it returned. A few days later, I went through the exercise of patching again, but of course, the leak reappeared. Upon further analysis, I realized that the leak was only evidence of a bigger problem. There was a hole in the roof of the house that my room was a part of. The name of my room is Central Grand Bahama. The other 4 rooms are East Grand Bahama, captained by Deputy Prime Minister, West Grand Bahama, captained by the Honorable Member Keisha Parker Edgecombe, Marco City, captained by the Honorable Michael Pintard, and of course Pine Ridge, captained by the Honorable Frederick Marco Pine. The house that we all live in is called Grand Bahama. Yes, we are experiencing leaks in our rooms, but eventually the roof that represents the economy of Grand Bahama will be fixed by this new administration. In Grand Bahama, we will continue to work together to push for the hotels to reopen. We will continue to push for new industries. We will continue to explore the maritime industry. We will continue to push for ecotourism development. We will continue to make Grand Bahama investor-friendly. Equally important, we will continue to raise the bar in education and in service. My fellow parliamentarians, we are all captains of a room in our Bahamian Parliament, of a room in this great house called the Bahamas. Let us continue to work together to fix the roof, to shore up our foundation, and to continue to build on the shoulders of giants who would have laid a solid foundation for us. And as God give us the strength and extend His grace and mercies to all of us, let us continue to build a better Bahamas, our house, our country. May God bless Central Grand Bahama. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I thank you very much.
As many? The chair recognizes the honourable member for St. Barnabas. St. Barnabas.
I'm waiting to see if they go on a break. I don't know what they want to do.
Honourable member, I understand that some stomachs might be growling, but we'll proceed nonetheless.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I give honor and gratitude to Almighty God, who is the great architect of the universe, for his mercy and his grace, both of which has given me the privilege to stand here today as the voice for the people of Coconut Grove, Big Pond, Black Village, Rock Crusher, and Oakfield, collectively the great constituency of St. Barnabas. Mr. Speaker, I rise to offer my humble thanks to Her Excellency, Dame Marguerite Pinling, for a speech from the throne, and to express my admiration for the grace, elegance, sophistication she continues to exemplify in her carriage of her duties as Governor General. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to thank the many Bahamians who stop me daily to encourage my individual efforts and the efforts of our government to bring meaningful transformation and real change to our constituents and the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. It is often said, Mr. Speaker, that Mr. Speaker, I do not qualification attached, for I believe that greatness is not qualified by the size of a nation, but the enormity of its people's individual talents, purpose, achievements, and ability to excel. Place a Bahamian who comes out of a population of a mere 400,000 people, Mr. Speaker, in any country, on any continent, in any discipline, and watch them excel. Though not perfect, Mr. Speaker, it is my contention that the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is the greatest nation on earth. Mr. Speaker, it is this fact, this greatness, that provides the greatest opportunity for us to solve our greatest challenges as a country, and it is what has always had me hopeful about our capacity to shape a future built on the ingenuity and the empowerment of the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, this honorable House just celebrated a milestone this past Friday. 288 years ago, on September 29, 1729, this honorable body, Mr. Speaker, met for the first time and has met uninterrupted ever since, affording the Commonwealth of the Bahamas the distinction of having one of the oldest parliamentary democracies in the Western Hemisphere. It represents a profound historical bookmark that must, I believe, give us pause and a moment of reflection for those of us that now occupy this honorable place. For we are now stewards, caretakers of the legacy and legislative imprints of these hallowed halls. I must add, Mr. Speaker, that every political blue moon, you may be fortunate enough to witness a leadership race in one of the political parties. And this session has given that to us as well, Mr. Speaker. And while I choose not to get into the business of the members opposite, I wish them well. No horse in the race, Southern Shores. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, just 6 months into the life of this 66th Parliament, it is fitting to ponder on the 288 years of work in the parliamentary quarries by our predecessors. It is important, Mr. Speaker, because it will no doubt give us the opportunity to improve on the pieces of legislation and to finally enact necessary laws that may possibly have been either aborted or slowed because of the political climate of that date. A cursory review, Mr. Speaker, of the parliamentary exercises over the past 288 years gives us many insights into what can be accomplished when, Mr. Speaker, pardon me, when there is the collective political will. In 1833, an act was passed by Parliament that saw the removal of all civil disabilities from men of color. This act gave way to the election of 3 colored men, Mr. Speaker: Stephen Dillett, Edward LaRota, and John Dane. In 1961, an historic piece of legislation was passed that has now given my 3 daughters, Mr. Speaker, and other young Bahamian women the ability and right to stand before the ballot box, Mr. Speaker, and exercise their democratic voices through their right to vote. In 1992, the amendment to the Broadcasting Act allowed for private telecommunication licenses, which gave new avenues for the electorate, the Bahamian people, to vigorously criticize their government and to hold them into account. These pieces of legislation served to undo existing inequities in our society and allowed for the entrenchment of democratic values that have altered the course of Bahamian history for the better, Mr. Speaker. Friday past is a reminder to us all, government and opposition alike, that the Bahamian people are watching, and so is history. We must continue to use our roles as instruments to transform the lives of the Bahamian people and this country we love. Mr. Speaker, I accept that the responsibility to govern is attached to a greater percentage to the majority, but the opposition must not just be agitators in their eagerness to score political points. They must not just oppose, but propose alternate views and solutions, Mr. Speaker. We all know that there will always be issues where both sides will not agree, but surely we can agree on what is holding back progress in our land and just fix it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we know that our education system in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas needs to be repaired. So let us together, Mr. Speaker, fix it. We know that our healthcare system needs some massive changes. So let us together as a government and as opposition, let us just fix it, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know that these issues are somewhat complex, so I don't mean to oversimplify what's ahead for us as a body. But all I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that we must do our endeavor best to find ways to cut through the political jostling and get things done. And I've often said, Mr. Speaker, I am not naive about the political realities we face. But I believe, and I will always say, I believe that those political realities we face were created by us, just as the solutions to our country's most pressing problems reside within all of us, and right here in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, will we be relegated to the unfortunate category of those that left their courage on the outside, on the steps of this honorable House? Or will this session be remembered for the valor, the courage of its members that did not shrink at the challenges we face as a country and did right by the Bahamian people? Will we ferociously fend off the status quo and political inertia that has stopped progress on major issues of the day? 288 years from now, 50 years from now, 10 years from now, Mr. Speaker, will that new parliament be inspired by what we would have achieved for and on behalf of the Bahamian people? Would the course of Bahamian history be altered substantially and positively by our decisions in this honorable House? Mr. Speaker, I believe that the Honorable Prime Minister is determined to set a new course. We are at the start. So ultimately, Mr. Speaker, time, the Bahamian people, and history will be the ultimate judge. Mr. Speaker, I wish to turn my attention to a matter that has prompted much passionate debate and visceral reaction, some in support and some in disapproval of a policy decision regarding our brothers and sisters from Dominica. Mr. Speaker, because politics is famous for manufacturing unintended controversies, distorting and mangling words and sentiments, let me establish some personal core convictions from the outset. I view myself as a Bahamian nationalist. I love my country and my people. Like so many others, I left opportunities in foreign lands to return home to build the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and serve my people. I believe that the Bahamas is for Bahamians and should be given priority in our country. I believe that Bahamians must not be disenfranchised in any form. I believe, Mr. Speaker, for far too long, in many respects, the Bahamian people have been battling the red tape, while some foreign interests enjoy the red carpet. I know that many Bahamians are suffering, including my constituents, Mr. Speaker, in St. Barnabas. It pains me, and daily I hold back the tears to provide strength and hope to many of my constituents as I work on their behalf. And I am working, Mr. Speaker, to make their lives better. Mr. Speaker, I do believe, too, that I can simultaneously extend my humanity across our borders and across our oceans. Let me also emphasize, Mr. Speaker, I am not overly critical or desirous of railing personally against those that don't support this policy, because here is the fundamental truth, Mr. Speaker. There have been legitimate questions about this policy, and the Bahamian people have a right to ask. Absolutely. In my view, the Honorable Prime Minister has answered the why, when, and how in his communication last week. So, Mr. Speaker, what is left is what I believe is the core question for Bahamian citizens and individual members of this Honorable House. That is, do we choose to assist and help our Dominican brothers and sisters or not? Do we fundamentally believe, Mr. Speaker, that that should be done? Mr. Speaker, the cold hard truth is this: if you believe that the government of the Bahamas, the Bahamian people, should not be assisting Dominica, you can find many reasons for your argument. No position or view is free of being challenged. Similarly, if you support the government's decision, you can offer multiple reasons for justification. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because some decisions are simply a matter of choice, conscience, and leadership. Mr. Speaker, this debate does present a fundamental question. What do we want the Commonwealth of the Bahamas to be about? The preamble to our Constitution shed some light. It says in part, Mr. Speaker, that the preservation of our freedom is guaranteed by a national commitment to self-discipline, industry, loyalty, unity, and an abiding respect for Christian values and the rule of law. Mr. Speaker, Christian values. Now, I'm not about to get into any debate about the relevance of certain scriptures, Mr. Speaker. I am a member of the Holy Roman Catholic Church and was christened in the Church of God, Bowes Town, under the direction of my great-grandmother, Linda Ferguson Beneby, from Snug Corner, Aucklands. Mr. Speaker, besides hearing Mama singing, I'm coming up on the rough side of the mountain every day, listening to Reverend J.J. Stubbs 6 a.m. in the morning, and singing the many songs by the Cooling Waters. You like that, Fine Rich? She repeated a certain scripture often, Mr. Speaker. Matthew 22, 36 through 40. Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, Mr. Speaker. This is the first great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all law and prophets. Mr. Speaker, I see this as an act of love for our neighbors, not loving them any more than our people, or focusing any less on our people's pains or the pains of the people of St. Barnabas. Mr. Speaker, I just wish to emphasize, too, as we consider and streamline our separate views on this matter, know that there are scores of Dominicans that have left the island years ago, came to the Bahamas, and still continue to this day to contribute to the development of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and its people, in medicine, in the public sector, and in education. Mrs. Ann Garraway, a Dominican, taught at the government high school from 1980 to 1987, Mr. Speaker, and carried that commitment of educating young Bahamians to St. Augustine's College from 1987 to 2003. Mr. Speaker, I was the beneficiary of tutelage under Mrs. Ann Garraway. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Alex Leopold Roberts, a Dominican, has been living in the Bahamas from 1978. I was 2 years old, Mr. Speaker. Taught in Grand Bahama at St. Paul's College. Spent 21 years, Mr. Speaker, at Queen's College. 8 years at the Securities Commission. And for the last 7 years has served as the administrator for the Ranfley Home for Children, caring for the most vulnerable and most susceptible Bahamian children. Mr. Speaker, these are just two of many Dominicans that have devoted their lives to enriching the lives of young Bahamians and helping to build the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And Mr. Speaker, can you imagine the thousands of Bahamian young men and women who have been impacted by the contributions, in this case, of these two Dominicans? All I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is let us not be insular and selfish in our thinking. Let us be guided by our humanity and resist the temptation to be clannish. Let us resist the urge to close our hands and imprison our hearts. One day we may need an open hand, Mr. Speaker, and a free heart. Mr. Speaker, during the summer recess, the Honorable Prime Minister saw it fit to appoint me as chairman of the Bahamas Public Parks and Public Beaches Authority. Honorable Prime Minister, I am grateful to you, sir, for your confidence and opportunity to serve the Bahamian people in another capacity. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas Public Parks and Public Beaches Authority was created by an Act of Parliament in 2014 to manage and administer the usage of public parks, public beaches, and green spaces for the enjoyment of the Bahamian people. The staff and personnel of the Bahamas Public Parks and Public Beaches Authority are committed to servicing the Bahamian people in our role in conjunction with other agencies and departments within the Ministry of the Environment and Housing to ensure the cleanliness and proper manicuring of our public spaces, including our beaches. Mr. Speaker, I commend the hardworking staff of the authority who are working morning to evening to meet the authority's objectives. Mr. Speaker, the work of the authority requires diligence and awareness from the Bahamian public as well. The indiscriminate dumping, particularly in areas of Marshall Road, Yamacraw, and all points in between and beyond, must stop, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the littering must stop. I take note, Mr. Speaker, of the comments from the honorable member of South Andros in reference to the airport road. That road is cleaned daily. But we clean that road in the evening, and by morning, it's filled with litter. It must stop, Mr. Speaker. There must be a sense of pride and love of country so deep that it would suppress somebody's urge to throw a can or some papers out of their window. Mr. Speaker, aggressive cleaning and manicuring efforts of the Bahamas Public Parks and Beaches Authority will be a fruitless exercise if we as Bahamians do not discourage this nasty behavior by some in both informal and formal ways. Mr. Speaker, the authority is currently engaged in the manicuring of roadside verges, parks, and beaches throughout New Providence. We have touched and made progress in every constituency on the island of New Providence, but the work continues, Mr. Speaker. It is constant, especially with the recent spate of heavy rain in the past few weeks. Mr. Speaker, we are very aware of the overgrown areas in certain pockets of the island and the seasonal abundance of seaweed on our beaches. We are addressing both issues. We are both proactive and responsive. Where we are not addressing a concern as a part of our daily and weekly strategy, once alerted, we will be there and it will be dealt with. Mr. Speaker, unauthorized and expired road signs and billboards have become an increasing problem as they add to the clutter on our streets, and it falls under the purview of the Bahamas Public Parks and Beaches Authority. In our commitment to enhance our verges, roundabouts, and street corners, we wish to inform the Bahamian public that via public notice, all vendors, organizations, and associations have been asked to remove all unauthorized and expired signs as per their permit agreement from the Permits and Prosecution Department within the authority. As of October 1st, we have engaged in an aggressive initiative, Mr. Speaker, to remove unauthorized signage and billboards. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the authority is presently in the process of implementing a deposit refundable on the verifiable removal of these signs by our inspection department. And we ask the public's cooperation in this endeavor and all efforts to augment and enhance our public spaces and beaches. Mr. Speaker, The people of St. Barnabas have sent me here to fight for them and to work fiercely on their behalf, to work with them, to improve their communities and to make things better. Mr. Speaker, important too, I believe, is the need to recognize the great accomplishments of my constituents. The people of St. Barnabas are doing great things, Mr. Speaker. I wish to acknowledge and congratulate Ms. Janet Williams of Black Village and her son Matthew Christian Alexio Williams, who served as head boy and was named valedictorian of Government High School. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to highlight the work of Principal Joan Gray, the faculty and staff of C.C. Sweeting High School, on a stellar job as a part of the Bahamas National High School Diploma Program. C.C. Sweeting is home of the top valedictorian, Shantanig Miller, and salutatorian, Alkira Cooper. Mr. Speaker, it never escapes me that I am here, carrying the hopes and dreams and aspirations of the people of St. Barnabas. Many communities within the St. Barnabas constituency, Mr. Speaker, have been neglected for far too long. The people of St. Barnabas look forward to the redevelopment of the inner city as envisioned by the Honorable Prime Minister and the impact it will have on the lives of my constituents. Mr. Speaker, Coconut Grove in particular is extremely proud that one of its own from Exuma Street, now Amos Ferguson Street, serves as the Honorable Prime Minister. They've said that they know that, quote, Minis will not forget us, and I assured them the Honorable Prime Minister will not forget them. Mr. Speaker, they've said that they know Minis will not forget us, and I assured them the Honorable Prime Minister will not forget. Mr. Speaker, we have begun the process of revitalization with a cleanup campaign to eliminate debris, bulk waste, and derelict vehicles in conjunction with the Department of Environmental Health. And I wish to extend our gratitude to the Minister of the Environment and Housing, the member for Marathon. We are engaged with community stakeholders throughout the constituency to partner with existing community associations like the Big Pond Association and formally develop the Coconut Grove Community Association. We are looking forward, Mr. Speaker, to the formation of the St. Barnabas Small Business Alliance to find ways to increase and strengthen commerce within the constituency. Mr. Speaker, I hope to announce very soon to my constituents the location of the new St. Barnabas Community Center that will act as a place to house social, educational, adult, and youth development programs, as well as act as a storehouse, Mr. Speaker, for the needy in the constituency. Mr. Speaker, we will launch very shortly our Salute to Greatness initiative, highlighting the historic figures and personalities who resided in the constituency and who are deemed community and nation builders. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of history in St. Barnabas, so we will erect points of interest and historic landmark signs so that both residents and visitors alike can be exposed to the proud history that in some cases have been forgotten by some. Mr. Speaker, in September, we held our back-to-school bash and were able to give some 1,010 bags and accompanying school supplies to primary and high school students. Just a small way, Mr. Speaker, to help them get ready for the new school year. I wish those students a successful year, study hard, achieve great things, be the best that you can be, Mr. Speaker. Your country needs you. Mr. Speaker, through diligence and a few contacts, we've been able to place about 23 young men and women into secure jobs, Mr. Speaker. Something that has made me very, very proud, the opportunity to give people the opportunity for employment. Mr. Speaker, in preparation for Hurricane Irma, there was much anxiety as expected, but it was offset by the pouring out of support from neighbors who saw the need to help each other and even took in neighbors, Mr. Speaker, wherever they could. 4 teams were dispatched with tools and all, and were glad to assist in a small way. And we were glad to assist in a small way, Mr. Speaker, by giving out some 600 bags of sand and helping constituents batten up, particularly the aged, disabled, and widows. Mr. Speaker, the people of St. Barnabas are grateful to the member for Elizabeth, the Minister of Health, for ensuring that the roof of the Coconut Grove Clinic will receive its much-needed repair. We are grateful, too, to the member for Seabreeze, and we are looking forward to the opening of this St. Barnabas Urban Renewal Center. To the member for Carmichael, we are most thankful that you have been receptive to the concerns of much-needed paving, erection of speed bumps, and the need to alleviate flooding in the Coconut Grove and Big Pond communities. Mr. Speaker, St. Barnabas still believes that it's the people's time. Mr. Speaker, there are consistently two very difficult experiences for me as a member of Parliament. The first, Mr. Speaker, is the inability at times to see every constituent that needs and wants to see you, and should see you, I might add. I look forward to seeing my constituents, Mr. Speaker, and have remained as accessible as time would allow. Mr. Speaker, since the election on May 10th, besides walking in the various communities, I've seen over 250 constituents at my office, 102 of which have been by appointment, and over 150 have been constituents who just stopped in to share their concerns. The office is fully open Monday to Friday and has never closed its doors. To the people of St. Barnabas, I continue to be here for you and serve you. Mr. Speaker, the second difficult experience, I would say, that is in fact the most difficult, is when any of my constituents lose a loved one. The time I spend with them and the words I offer, I know, cannot substitute for what they have lost, but sharing and supporting them in their time of grief is the most important thing that I can do as their Member of Parliament. Geraldine Strawn, Adrian Aswood, Jeffrey Roll, Shirley Brown, Richard Clark, Ayanna Dawkins, Maitland Burrows, Monica Roll, Mandra Ladley, Mary Lee Mortimer, James Monroe, Derek Neely, Gladstone Monroe, Eric Cooper, Hester Maker, Alicia Silverlane, Lawrence Miller, Desiree Denise Wiley, and Olive McKinsey. May their souls and the souls of the dearly departed rest in peace and rise in glory. As I close, Mr. Speaker, though honorable we are, each of us is imperfect, for perfection, as we know, resides only with our God. So we will ultimately be judged, Mr. Speaker, by Him according to our sins and the degree to which we acknowledge them and ask for His forgiveness. To a lesser extent, parliamentary history will ultimately judge the manner in which we conduct ourselves, the genuineness and authenticity by which we ascribe our intentions, and the honor we affirm by how we speak, how we act, and what we lay bare ironclad on the formal records of this House for future generations to see. Mr. Speaker, I cannot in good conscience retire to my seat without burdening the risk of being labeled as an ingrate, not worthy to hold this office, and take my seat in this honorable House if I had not cast upon the record of this House a final farewell to a man who occupied this honorable place and served his country with distinction. Mr. Speaker, I knew Dr. Bernard Jonathan Nottage personally. I was one of the thousands of babies he delivered. We later in life disagreed on politics that always gave him the opportunity to remind me of the spanking he gave me on the day of my birth. But during those many conversations, he would always stoke my motivation and desire to serve the Bahamian people. It reaffirmed the consciousness that every member, regardless of their politics, who has had the honor to serve the Bahamian people, ought to be lauded for their commitment to serve and serve their countrymen. What was always clear to me, Mr. Speaker, and palatable, was that you felt in Dr. Nottage's presence that he had an unapologetic love for his country and the Bahamian people. His contributions to athletics, medicine, and politics reflect the diversity and service to a nation he loved and a vigor in service to his people he cherished. Mr. Speaker, the good book says in 2 Timothy, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Mr. Speaker, Dr. Bernard Nottage fought the good fight. He ran his last campaign and finished his race, doing what he loved to do, serving his country and his people. I can only humbly hope, Mr. Speaker, and pray that in my imperfection, when the Bahamian people decide that they no longer desire for me to serve in this honorable place, that the good that I would have done in service to my people outweighs the bad. And if God would have it, and I'm fortunate enough, Mr. Speaker, some newly elected member in the future would wish to rise to their feet, as I have, and to say that I was a patriot and statesman of the highest order, like Dr. the Honorable Bernard Knowledge. May his soul rest in peace. Mr. Speaker, I thank Her Excellency Dame Marguerite Pinling for her gracious speech from the throne. May God bless the Bahamian people, the people of the great constituency of St. Barnabas, and may he continue to richly bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Central and South Abaco. The chair also now recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the House do suspend until 3:30 p.m. this evening, Wednesday, the 4th of October.
Is there a seconder?
Second that.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon. 3:30?
3:30.
3:30 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will rise. The business of the House stands suspended until 3:30 p.m. this afternoon.